the participant to this. Yeah, I welcome all the participants to this ICAI Startup Marathon 2.0 week. Today is the third day, and we had two wonderful day. Entire four session was there. We started with the inauguration of the CP's Goenji Honorable Minister, and he spoke very nicely about the chartered accountant. Chartered accountant can render the service to the startup, and they become also hence a startup. And then we had a government ecosystem where the Startup India Methi was presented what global people are doing it and what the government is providing an ecosystem into the startup. And yesterday we have seen again a powerful panel where about the Siddharth Pai and other people were there. I spoke well how the startups can utilize the digitalization data and in the digital marketing, and then follow up whether unicorn are being made or they are gone. So now today we now have a set of the panelists that it's the startup is there, and now in the startup how the internal corporate governance for the startup is necessary and how it can be done it. I'm very glad to have a powerful panelist over here. I am also thankful to all the participants for entire 2 days appreciations. I'm getting every appreciation from all of you. That more than 10,000 members always been there for last 2 days continuously and sending a appreciation and your queue. I'm sure about that panel all my moderator will take care of all of your queries will be answered. If something is left out, will be seen that how it can be addressed. We'll take it, send it to the panelists, and we'll take and then put it on the website. So coming again to the next panelist, we have my very dear friend and very close friend Sanjeev Sinhaji in the council. He's from Delhi and partner in the ENY. So requesting for his opening remark to this particular session.
Thank you very much, Dheeraj Bhai. Very good afternoon to all, and it may be in fact good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon the location from where you are attending this program. I welcome you all on the day 3 of the Startup Marathon 2.0 week, and I really congratulate C. Ansraj Chugji and C. Dheeraj Khandelwalji, both my council colleagues, for taking up this initiative. This is a great initiative by the committee on the theme Startup Trilogy, Compliance Management and the Fundraising. For today's session on internal corporate governance, we have with us the stalwarts, the eminent speakers and co-founders of many startups. C.A. Pradeep Malu from Niti Ayog as the moderator, Mr. Sameer Inamdar from Forum Synergies, C.A. T.V. Mohandas Pai from Aaron Capital, and apart from that, we know him as a great contributor to the CA profession. We see him in the Center for Audit Quality meetings and it's so many other places. And Mr. Nikhil Vora from Sixth Sense Ventures and Anil Joshi from the Unicorn India Ventures. Corporate governance requirements evolve with the growth of a startup, being influenced not just by the size of the company, but also by expectation of various stakeholders. And there is no option but to have a better corporate governance. And there is no choice. One at times feel that this is not my short-term objective, this is my long-term objective. But corporate governance has to be embedded within the fundamentals of any initiative, any startup, any business that you take. These days, the stakeholder expectations are very high, and stakeholders also include the regulators. So there is no choice but to have a very strong corporate governance. And strong corporate governance also pays. Initially, I've seen that the challenges that startup face is building an effective corporate governance game plan that corresponds with the stage of maturity of the startups. And many startups tend to adopt a short-term, long-term approach that this is what we will do in short term, this is what we will do in long term. But I've always believed that strong pillars of corporate governance are very imperative for the success, for the long-term success of any organization. And chartered accountants can play a significant role in practicing a good corporate governance as compared to any other professional in various capacities. whether as a shareholder, as a part of management, as a promoter, or as an auditor. And corporate governance and chartered accountant roles are inseparable, and one cannot expect to practice the good practice without involvement of the finance professionals. So I hope for a wonderful session ahead, and I'm sure because of the quality of the panelists which are there, that they will share wonderful ideas, which will really be a boon for the budding startups. Thank you very much, dear Bhai, and with this, I would like to hand it over to you and then request the moderator to take up this session forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev ji, for your nice opening remarks on the internal corporate governance and importance of the chartered accountant into this corporate governance. And as the rightly, we have the right panelists for this: a power-packed chartered accountant, two chartered accountants, corporate governance professionals, and ventures. So I'll just introduce the panel over here, Pradeep Maruji. So Pradeep Maruji is going to take a lead for the as a panelist, as a moderator to the panelists, and he will ask a lot of questions representing the all the participants. He is a chartered accountant. I know him last 20 years, and he's being an advisor to the various corporate boards. He is doing a lot of corporate governance kind of practice. He himself was an entrepreneur in the last 35 years. He is associated with various groups, and now he is a part of the Niti Aayog Mentor of the Change Business Startup. So welcome, Maruji. Now we have Sami Inamdarji. He is a co-founder and CEO of the Forum Synergy. He's having more than 40 years a year of experience in various companies as president, CEO of the business of the General Electric Southeast Asia, then Tyco Electronic in Southeast Asia, for at least 10 years now. He formed a co-founded Forum Synergy fund, and which is managing the funds of the investment in engineering, technology, clean energy, and all. He is being invited in various forums. He was in speaker of the Doing Business in India for Stockholm School of Governance. So with this, I welcome to this forum Samir Nandaji. We have Nikhil Goraji, and Nikhil Goraji in the Startup 1.0, he was also one of the panelists, and he is the founder and CEO of the Sixth Sense Venture, India's first domestic consumer-centric venture. He invited by various corporate bodies in various analytical regions, and he is invited by the Nestle Global Consumer Board, and so on. He is also been rated by Asia Money Institutional Investor for being amongst the best analytical mind in the country. That's his beauty. He is known that a best analytical in the consumer segment. So I welcome Nikhil Goraji to this particular forum. Then we have the Anil Joshi ji, Managing Director, Unicorn India Venture. Anil ji is also a managing partner, founder, Unicorn India Venture in the leading venture in the capital fund, and he was part of the various head of the Mumbai Angel, Bangalore Angel, and leading a lot of other angels. He handled a lot of other kind of work. He is serving the various boards, and he involved in the various incubation centers, mentoring a lot of startups. So he basically graduated engineer, post-graduation in management marketing, and so on, and been number of panelists in the number of startup events. So I request welcome Anil Joshi, and I welcome again my the person who is very highly respected in CA fraternity, very most prominent in the chartered accountant fraternity. People, he's look at him, as a role model. When we talk about role model, I'm not here as a or Motilal Oswal in the entrepreneur side, we always look upon the Mohandas. So I'm now privileged to introduce him over here in this particular forum. He joined in '94 Infosys, and since then onward, he was serving in the board, and he was the CFO of the Infosys company in '94 to '96, and since then he had the CFO, and he voluntarily retirement, stepped down from the CFO to lead in the area of human resource, education, research, and he's the integral part of the Infosys team to get the Infosys into the listed on the Nasdaq. So that is the biggest achievement of when he voted for the in 2001 by ICAI as CFO of the Year award. He won the best CFO in India award from Finance Asia in 2002, and many more awards he awarded. And lot of views are there the awards. He himself a chartered accountant, and also on the IFRS Indian International Accounting Standard Committee Foundation, and he has interest in multiple global education institutes. A lot of work he's doing. He's now a partner to the currently in the Tin Capital. So with this, we have a powerful power packed panelist over here. Now I request Mohan Das Bhaiji for his monologue for 2 minutes on the topic of internal cash management for the startup. Everyone will take 2 to 3 minutes, then we'll hand over to the Pradeep Madhuji for their taking a decision.
Folks, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm deeply honored to be here. I live and work with startups today. We run about 14 funds. We have got 250 investments, $450 million invested. And we see 3,000 startups coming to us for capital every year. It's a very large system. I'm working in the most exciting part of India's journey to a $10 trillion economy, and happy to be here. Now, this is a very important question that startups should be asking and startups should be debating. Now, when you look at conventional corporate governance, it applies mostly to listed companies because there is public capital in a company. When there's private capital, you can afford to do many things easily. When there's public capital, it's very important. I was in a FICCI managing committee meeting at a time when SEBI brought in the regulations for majority of the minority to vote on related party transactions. Then the FICCI members were very upset as owners of the corporation. They own more than 55-60%. Then they turned to me as if I was an enemy to say, what is your view? We are all owners of this company. We own the majority and our voice should be heard. Then I told them, look, so long as you take 1 rupee from the public, you are accountable to them. And it's not your company. It belongs to everybody else. You may be the largest shareholder, 99%, but that 1% is extremely important. And you are a fiduciary agent of that 1%, and you cannot do things to yourself. And so we require good corporate governance norms. Now, when you look at a startup, essentially a startup is capitalized by either angels or venture capitalists or other investors along with the founders. It does not have public participation. So should they follow corporate governance norms? I would argue they must follow corporate governance norm for their own survival for a very important reason. Investment is an act of faith. I'm sure my colleagues who have worked and raised capital understand investment is an act of faith. When you look at a company, you look at cash flows, you don't know what is going to happen. The cash flows are estimates prepared by people who hopefully should know better than us, and many times do not know better than us. They're very optimistic. It may occur, it may not occur. So when you decide to invest, you invest as an act of faith. And that act of faith is what has to be kept in mind by the founders and the people who run the startup. As they grow along, they must make sure whatever they do, the faith of investors and others in the startup is kept all the time. And they must put in processes further. I would argue that capital is a competitive advantage. We have seen many startups raise capital at increasing valuations, and raising capital, large amounts, give them a competitive advantage to grow in a market where you can grow extremely rapidly. And the sole reason why people invest, apart from greed, which is a very important part of investing, is the fact that they trust you not to misuse the money, not to use it for personal purposes, and to have basic norms where you act as a fiduciary agent. So I would stop here and participate in the panel discussion. So I would argue that for their own sake and for survival, they have to follow that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So now I request Sami Nandaji for his thoughts on the subject.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a very difficult act to follow when you're asked to follow after Mr. Pai. But thanks a lot. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to a large number of people and be on a panel which is as eminent as this one. Well, Mr. Pai has already talked about why corporate governance is absolutely a must for startups. When you come to practical life, the general perception is that in India, the standards of corporate governance are quite poor. And I think there is actually some amount of truth in this as compared to the Western world. One can make an argument that in India, we are far behind, right? Why is it so? Why are the lapses so much more widespread in India? Whether they are conscious or unconscious, whether they are intentional or unintentional, but they are widespread. Is it somehow that some people tend to argue that the moral fabric of the Indians is made of poorer material than the Westerners? Absolutely not. I mean, that's the most ridiculous statement to make. I think, the behavior, the value systems, the attitudes, the worldview of all of us, including promoters, including founders, and including businesses, is shaped by the environment, by the regulatory system that we are in. So when we do business, we have to be conscious of what environment we are in. So to explain my point, let me talk about if you are a business in Singapore, right? And if you want to do something wrong, you are very scared because the probability of getting caught is very high. The speed and the certainty of punishment is very high, and the severity of punishment is very high. So the cost of doing something wrong is far higher than the benefits of doing something wrong. Unfortunately, so far in India, we are not yet there. Of course, it's another subject as to what we need to do as a country to get there. And, that's not the subject today. But it does involve, I'll quickly mention in my view, it involves 5 different things. And those things, we have made a lot of progress on them in the last few years. But there is some way to go, which is administrative reforms, judicial reforms, police reforms, electoral reforms, ease of doing business. But that's not the subject. So let's not spend time on that. So the question is, therefore, that if it is a relatively low-risk affair to live with poor governance standards in India, is that a good thing for a business to do from a business's perspective? So this reminds me, early in my career, I used to work for this company called Maruti, which is, in those days, it was probably, apart from Ambassador and Fiat, that was the only company manufacturing cars. And we had a director. And when he visited suppliers, right, and when he went to the shop floor of suppliers, he insisted that he wants to go into and take a good look at the workers' washrooms, right? And he always believed that the cleanliness, the organization, the facilities provided in the workers' washroom is an indicator of the quality of the management. And I think, if I look at the corporate governance issue, it seems to me that corporate governance structure in a startup is an indicator of how management values the rights as well as opinions and perceptions of varied stakeholders in a startup, whether it is employees or it is investors or it is regulatory structure or suppliers or customers. So when Mr. Pai has already talked about, I think I've been associated with private equity funds, especially from outside. Whenever you raise institutional capital, whether from India or from outside of India, private equity funds that have been associated have walked away from deals simply because they haven't been happy with the corporate governance structure and the issues therein. Today, therefore, there is actually a selfish reason for a founder to ensure that the corporate governance standards are high, and that is valuation. In many ways, once you have corporate governance, if you don't have them high, then it's bound to be discovered in due diligence, and then the reduction in valuation is going to be far higher than just the cost of correcting those issues. So it's like the Caesar's wife. The corporate governance structure in startups today not only has to be of high standards, but has to be seen to be of high standards as well. So initially one might think that it's nice to have luxury, but more you go into the lifetime of a startup, more difficult it becomes to actually reform it if you don't already have it. I will just end here by saying one thing, that one most important thing is to, this whole thing has to permeate across the entire organization. It should begin with the top, and it should be very explicitly stated by the founder as to what kind of vision and what kind of standards does he want for corporate governance. I think that's the most important. I'll stop here, and then, of course, we will talk more in the panel discussion.
Right. So I now invite the opening remark from Nikhil for your opening thoughts. You are on mute.
Thanks, Dheeraj, so much for this. I have a couple of things to just state. I think, one is in India, I think, I believe that, entrepreneurship is rampant. Every fifth or sixth Indian is an entrepreneur in his mind. So by default, you're looking at founders who are coming in from almost all walks of life and experiences. So which also means that the expectations of what fair corporate governance is can differ from founders to founders. And while Mr. Pai did mention about the fact that public market has a lot more scrutiny, my sense is frankly that unlike in the last couple of decades or more in India, where there was a need for a lot of scrutiny of public market participants because there was a lot of capital which was chasing that business. My sense is that the next generation of entrepreneurs that one sees and which all of us tend to invest in now, I think they start with a moral high ground. I actually believe that they actually have a moral high ground because these are businesses and entrepreneurs who would potentially get a $500,000 to $1 million salary if they just walked out and set up shop. They're there in it not because they want to take the first couple of millions out of system, which used to be the case in India for till yesterday almost. I think they're there to create value. They're there to create a difference in what they're trying to do. So to me, frankly, the corporate governance level, irrespective of what the benchmarks are already getting set where we speak today with most entrepreneurs that one looks at. And we will always have exceptions, but let's assume those are not making the rule. Second is also about the fact that, we have to assume and believe that, in a lot of these startups or early stage companies that one looks at, I think it's also businesses which are low on resources, not just capital, but also other resources which are required to really ensure that fiduciarily you're doing all the right things at all the right points in time. And I know Mr. Pai has gone through this and he's pretty much the biggest voice in this rather. But I think it's difficult to expect that there will be a benchmark standard laid out by everyone, which is at the highest ebb. I think it will be difficult and impractical to assume that. Sometimes capital creates some solution. Sometimes it's the mindset which creates a solution. And sometimes it's just the fact that you're doing a lot of things at the front end, which is working well, which enables companies also to believe that there is a larger goal to do and chase. So that changes a lot of aspects that one looks at. So I think what would be very critical is whether the founders have the founder card is good enough, which means that do we believe that the culture which the founder comes with is something which is fair in the context in which they operate in. Now, because culture is something which they can set. Capital is something which will happen over a period of time or may not happen. But that is something which the founders can set. And to me, I would want to believe that a lot more has happened almost unknowingly in India over the last maybe 5 years and hopefully in the next few decades as we move forward than what we've seen in the last 5 decades. One is obviously the fact that, I also want to maybe make a bit of a controversial statement somewhere. I think that I don't believe that in India right now, you still get a great premium for a complete high corporate governance part. It's very important. While I'm sure in fairness, everyone wants to be transparent, corporate governance should be at a high ebb. But is it a fact, and not yet proven, I think, is it a proven fact that a business, if it's getting valued at, let's say, hypothetically, getting valued at 5 times multiple on revenues, will they get valued at 8 times multiple because they are fantastic in all the hygiene checks that one wants? Today, I don't think that is proven completely. So I think there is also what the environment needs to do to enable this to happen in a more prolific manner. I don't think anyone would want to debate that corporate governance is a must, necessity, and so on. But I just think that the environment also has to be conducive enough for people to say, okay, we are good to sacrifice, or because there is a cost for ensuring complete hygiene. I would want to believe that the moment India moves that level up, which has happened in a lot of countries, then I think you will see a completely different shape of how standards are in our country than what's been before. Indians do have a very short memory, and we've seen one incident happen today. I don't know how much of that is true, but if we start to believe that we can get a higher value of a business, all our stakeholders become relevant in it, I think there will be an environmental change also required to support change internally.
Good. I think we'll take it further again on the discussion part. So now let's hear it from the Anil Joshi ji also as well about their point of view. Then we'll have the panel discussion. Anil Joshi ji.
Thanks, Dheeraj. Having me on this panel, of course, Pai sir, Nikhil, and Samvit ji have already shared a lot of interesting points. But I would like to highlight a couple of things. Right, we at fund level nowadays are also subject to called ESG audit. Right, Pai sir will very much agree with me that it's very important and fund level, and that also make us our responsibility more fiduciary to our investors. And we are very categorical, right? Like Samarji rightly said, if your governance is not right, you will end up losing potential investment from investor. And I've seen several cases because I work at in fact, I am probably one among few who started too early in angel stage. And initially I saw people were investing with just mere 12 pages of agreement, out of which 4 pages would be addresses and names and this, and hardly 2 or 3 pages were talking about terms of the agreement. And when I started onboarding investors, one thing I was made to do in industry was to look at how we protect investors' interest, right? So to give you a classic case, one investment I remember during Mumbai Angel days, I'll not name company, but I think we had invested approximately $500,000 those days, upward of 3 crore. And we used to get balance sheet, and there would be some asset allocation and payment going to bank. And when some deeper diligence was done, because we saw some regular payment going, and we realized that 2 new Honda Accord were purchased. Right, and this 2 Honda Accord were purchased not for business but for founders. So you as an investor feel jittery because the money what you have put in was for promotion of business, growth of business, but here the money was being used for some luxury aspiration of founders, right? So for us, as rightly told by Pai sir, that faith, I will also add a word of trust, right? It's all business of trust, right? When we raise investment, investors put in money in us only because they trust and they believe that after 7, 8, 9 years we'll be able to give their ROI on their investment. So I think internal governance is very important. I have several cases where I've seen company which lagged on internal governance going down the tube, in spite of having a very highly scalable business and investors waiting to invest in, but those company went down the tube only because their internal governance factors and policies were so weak that though, like I have seen, and I'm talking about those days when even 2 crore of investment in startup was considered to be quite big, right? And angels were always doing something around 2.5, 3 crore, max was 3 crore. And one company we landed up investing 7 crores, right? That was one of the highest those days from angel perspective, one single investment, and that company went down only because of mismanagement. And trust me, I don't think founder made money, but it was because of non right practices, bad practices they follow, company just went down the tube. So I think it's very important. And as far as we investors are concerned, in fact, we have said no to a couple of deals only because we found that certain bills were added just to balloon the numbers so that we get excited about investment in a company. And when we got financial DD done, those things got highlighted because bills were there, customers were not there, money was not to be seen. So it matters if we really want to. So while Nikhil has rightly highlighted, will internal governance will attract premium, I'll say probably no, but certainly it will attract high quality investors who will stand by you, and that long journey will be much more beautiful compared to your short term journey. So with those thoughts, I would like to go ahead. Thank you.
Great. I think superb. So now hand over to the Pradeep Baruji for taking forward.
Thank you, Dheeraj. Thank you so much. And thank you all my esteemed panelists for their opening remarks. It has been, again, welcome to all of you on this power panel discussion on the subject, very interesting, internal corporate governance startups. While the corporate governance debate has mostly focused on listed companies, the challenges of corporate governance in startups deserves a special attention. Relatively, you'll find that little attention is given and little of research has happened. But recent experiences across the globe on corporate governance contains important lessons for improving the businesses and the environment of the same in terms of more particularly about the startups. I just want to say that this power panel will have answers to various questions like what are the corporate governance characteristics of a startup, or what are the driving forces for improving the corporate governance practices in a startup, or what is the role of a public policy framework in supporting good corporate governance for a startup companies. A lot of answers and guidance would coming in from the discussion which would happen today. As the advisors and a lot of people, the participants here, they would get this kind of advice because they are involved with the startups as an advisor or a policymaker or the board member, manager, equity provider, creditor, and maybe in different ways in terms of having some stake in the company. So therefore, it is the idea to deliberate in today's the panel discussion. In the next 1 hour, definitely we're going to discuss the legal framework, disclosure requirement, social responsibilities, management, and funding of startups as well, which covers by and large as to how a startup has to behave in terms of building good governance. And alongside, more emphasis which I would like to give, on behalf of the participants here, I would be looking forward from our esteemed panelists to have more and more real life examples in terms of understanding and getting the context right. Overall, the session will provide the panorama of different aspects of corporate governance in different ownership structures, legal, traditional, cultural context around the and different ground level challenges and possible incentives for the better corporate governance of startups in India and around the world. As most of the panelists or rather all the panelists in their opening remarks have covered, whether it's the trust or the faith or the structure, right from the stage 1 or stage 2 or the morale and so forth. So I just want to bring in the context a little in place as how we want to move forward. A corporate governance structure combines controls, policies, and guidelines that drive the organization towards its objectives while also satisfying stakeholders' needs. Now, there are a couple of things which are important here before I move on to putting forward certain points to the panel. I would say that there are startup stages. And as there are different stages, like, for example, ideation and validation and early action, scaling, corporate, and so forth. And there could be some more. They are very quick in terms of understanding. And at the same time, there are different stakeholders, and sometimes the stakeholders would have contrary views in terms of certain points, like for example founders and co-founders. So that how the stakeholders would be like a group of stakeholders, we can define them like founders, co-founders, investors, incubators, accelerators, mentors, employees, consultant, public at large, bank, financial institutions, and so on. So the whole idea is the internal corporate governance, or the corporate governance, which is part of this this discussion. This is probably for the first time on this scale. We are talking about the corporate governance from the startup point of view. So based on what input has come in, and as we go along, I will have a first question with Anil. You have invested large amount of money, I think over 60 startups, and raised for them and provided them almost over 100 crore rupees or even plus at different stages. So for you, as you have tried to touch this point in your opening remarks, what is corporate governance in a startup? How do you look at it? How it works? What should be the framework? What you look at it before you shortlist or before you select a candidate for investment? Anil?
So thanks, Pradeep. I think it's very important. So most of the deals, we come across are all first generation entrepreneur, and in some cases with very little corporate experience. So initially, we were writing check. I'm talking about angel days, with very little amount of diligence, and once we have invested, certain things will come to our attention, or rather to our surprise, that there are compliances issues, right? So if you look at the problems what I had been facing, and I think it's true for most of the people, that compliances are almost at a zero level, right? To give you example, TDS deducted but not paid, right? We have heard good stories about PF, right? I did not have to give example on that, but GST, right? Charge but not given, right? Similarly, we also came across certain like loan taken but not accounted for, right? So compliances are all almost zero, and as rightly told by Nikhil during early days, one is their inability to know, or ignorance, you can say, right? People are not aware about the subject, because in most cases we come across engineers who start and who doesn't have much knowledge about finance, right? So what we have started doing, Pradeep, after with so many investments and experience, we have started doing very rigorous financial diligence and legal diligence, right? These are two separate exercises we have started doing, and this gives us a laundry list, right? It's not we want to say no to deals, but we just want to be aware, and we just try to see why this have been ignored or delayed. In some cases people they didn't had cash flow, right? So they deferred TDS payment, right? So we check the background check, and we realize that it's a genuine case, lack of money, and that resulted in deferment of TDS. So we say, okay, we will ignore this, but henceforth you have to ensure that you comply with all your statutory obligations. So the experience has been, Pradeep, which is still continuing, right? In most of the cases we do realize people ignore our ROC filings, and what we have realized, in fact nowadays it is slightly fiery to take board position, right? I'm due to be on board of 3 companies, but still I haven't taken the board position, because it puts a lot of obligations and compliances on me. One single issue with one company triggers issues with all other companies. So it has become important for us to really pay emphasis on compliances. We rigorously look at diligence report, and then we put a check and balances on that, and in some cases we will even insisted appointment of right resources, so that such certain things can be avoided. Because see, we want compliances to be in place, right? It should be an auto process. It should not in a person at a board level just need to call a board meeting to ensure that the compliances are there. Of course I still do, because I don't want to be on wrong side of the table, but objective is that once we invest in, we help company grow in right way, right? And in ethical way. So this is my view, right? Two checks we have brought in. We have included both legal and financial diligence, and that report of 25, 30, 40 pages helps us correcting things and then putting things in right perspective, in dealing our rest of life with those investments. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil, for this enlightening on terms of compliances part. Sameer, do you think that there is a large number of you have been investing money as a part of venture fund for MSMEs and so forth? Do you think compliance has been the major portion or major thing which you look at in terms of the legal compliances I'm talking about as a major part of towards the compliances, the corporate governance part, or do you think it could be even enlarged from that perspective? Definitely, compliance part is very important. What Anil had highlighted. But what else do you think as corporate governance point of view in MSMEs, what you are attached with?
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, so before coming to your question, I just wanted to make one point. I think we should be very conscious of making a distinction between performance and governance, right? So it is quite possible that the management quality of the person, the quality of decision making may not be good, and therefore the business does not do well. But this is not what we are talking about right now. What we are talking about is the governance structure in the company. So the performance of the management is one thing, and the governance structure and the compliance is another thing, right? So that's the distinction I wanted to make. But coming to your question, I think obviously whether it is legal or it is financial due diligence, in fact business due diligence, are things that we definitely do. There's no question about it. But we also go a little bit beyond this, and what we realized was that you can have it's like a who is one step ahead. Is it you're able to hide things and you're one step ahead, or the person or the agency who is doing due diligence is one step ahead by uncovering things, right? So issue is goes a little bit beyond. It goes, like I said in my opening remarks also, it goes to the character and the vision and the what does the founder really want to do? What does he believe in, right? So when we look at it, we add one more dimension to the due diligence, and that dimension is a very specific, explicit, conscious process to actually get to know the founder very well. And that we do through not just formal meetings, but a number of informal meetings that we do before we take the call on investing. Because in my opinion, the worst thing to have is a very, very smart person who has very bad ethics, right? And you are going to have a situation where you can do whatever you want, but it's not going to work. So the character of the person, the intentions of the person is very important. And that's one additional dimension we add in the due diligence. And in this, I really appreciated what Nikhil said to begin with. I completely agree with him. I think the standards have been improving. There's no doubt about it. Standards have been improving, of course, because the environment has been improving in the last 5 or 6 years. But also the nature of the founders who are coming in, I think there are two dimensions there. Number one, more and more people from, let's say, category B, C towns are coming in and, starting startups. And therefore, their exposure to the best practices, the global best practices is much lower. But on the other hand, also, there are people who are coming in and starting on their own, those who could be in a corporate environment and actually command crores of rupees of salary per year. And therefore, they are in it because they are passionate, and they are in it because they want to do a good job. And therefore, the standards are going up as well. So I think that's a very important point, and that Nikhil made. I completely agree with it. But that's the character is the most important thing. I think the intention of the person is the most important thing, and that's what I wanted to add here.
Thanks, Samir. That's wonderful. In fact, what is important here? So, as you have rightly said, one is performance, another side is the compliance part. But most of the time, what happens in terms of compliance is the startups or the companies can definitely hire a few professionals, and that can take care of most of the time these kind of works, where whereas the larger contribution is required towards building a startup, maybe for a business where they started from, and so forth. So, as you have rightly said, I'm going to Nikhil on this now. As we all believe that corporate governance starts from typically starts. Or rather, it's an act of the board of directors, the company, and it goes down right from there to the last person of the company. And the board design, I know they are the one who are the trustees, or who are the the people collectively. They safeguard the interests of the stakeholders. How important it is in case of a startup at different stages. You have been investor in so many companies, and how important it was for you to look at these companies, and rather you ask the companies to reshuffle the board or bring in new people on the board or the new skills on the board and so forth. What I'm trying to say, does it help the recomposition and recomposition of the boards, and composition of the boards help in terms of improving the governance? Nikhil.
So firstly, I just want to make one point. I think to also understand what corporate governance is all about, it's also important to have a leader in that space. So, for example, what possibly Infosys did, and they made a fantastic PR of it also. I think it's very important, right? That a business, a company, the way it's run, gets noticed, and for fair reasons, it gets noticed, and that becomes a trend for every other player in that space to adapt. I think if you started to have that sort of a yardstick from leaders in most of the spaces which are there today, be it private, public, I think that would enable the entire system to get cleansed a lot more. Because let's say the amount of disclosure which Infosys started very early in their life cycle, now it's become almost a mandatory for anyone to ask the information that a leader provides. And that, I'm sure, would not have happened if you did not have a leader. So I think that's a very important ingrained, because I can't see, because corporate governance might mean different things to different people. This is not a uniform yardstick anywhere, right? So I might be okay with, in the Indian context, possibly being at 80-90% of the guys being in my line of sight being good enough. That's good enough. Maybe for Mr. Pai, 100% plus is not good enough. So, it really differs. But if you get leadership which is already showing that role, I think it's very easy to then gauge what is expected from all the players below that. So that's one point. Second, Anil actually mentioned, and I just want to fleetingly refer to this. Anil talked about the fact that he's slightly hesitant to be on 3 boards, which they've already invested in. Frankly, if we think that the businesses are not of the order which we can be part of as a board, then frankly, I'm not too sure how we can be part of as an investment altogether. That just, to me, is a bit of a challenge. And I'm just saying it as a matter of fact. If I feel there is an issue, then, as well as not invest, rather than not be on the board, because it's not about safeguarding my interests. It's about safeguarding fiduciarily the interests of the investors that I'm investing capital of. So I would want to do that. Sorry, and I have a fleeting memory, so I forgot what your question is.
No, my question, Nikhil, was basically how a startup at different stages. How important it is to have a composition of a board member, relevance of the board to the startup or to the company, how it is. So that's what I was, precisely I was hoping.
So, Pradeep, again, in startups specifically, not so much in the public market space. Most of the people who get associated with startups or early stage companies are people who want to be part of the system, either because as an investor, as a stakeholder, or because they feel they are a great sounding board for the companies. So by default, some of them are involved investors, unlike in listed companies, which is almost passive investors or passive board. Active board, but passive investors, right? So to me, the irony of startups, or the fact of startups, is that you are betting on founders to do the right thing. And if you have to bet on the board to supervise the founders to do the right thing, then I don't think we are in a situation right now where the board is so involved with the ops of the company that they will be able to direct it better. It might happen in tier A companies, which are already matured life cycle, and thereby processes are extremely well laid. I'm not too sure it happens in slightly early stage businesses. So I'm not too sure whether creating a decorative board really helps to create that ecosystem and the framework that one looks at. The fact is that if you have a decorative board, and I'm using that term, they'll be the first guys to move off the moment they see the first signs of trouble, because there's just too much to protect for themselves, their reputation or whatever they've done. So I'm not so sure about it. I think what is more ingrained and more important would be that if you're looking at corporate governance, is it very strongly instilled in the founder? And it could possibly just be as simple as saying that I want to be treated just the way I would treat someone else, and if someone else treating me the same way, and a lot of layers about it, right? So if, let's say, some of my personal expenses as an early stage entrepreneur, I might want to believe that it's a business owned by me. But if I start to pay for even getting my lunches and dinners, if I start to pay on my own, I think that's a great sign, because you are inculcating that DNA into the organization, saying that, guys, if I can do it on my own, despite me owning significant, or me being the driver of the business, I expect everyone to follow suit. So I think maybe those pointers might be slightly more important at the stage of the journey which a lot of founders will be at, and give the founders the liberty to say that, okay, they're not there to take the first 5 million out of the company. I think if our belief is that, I think we'll be okay. But I think it's important what I think Samir did talk about that, or I don't remember. Samir, I think, talked about it, that you do a lot more, not diligence, but you need to figure out the quality or the credibility or the face of the guy you are investing behind. Whether you like everything about that guy, his face, whether you think you can go with him for the next 7 years at least, which is a lot of things. It's about integrity, about what you feel about the person, what he can do in life, whether he's 6 months ahead of the curve of whatever the business life cycle will be. So I think those are important changeovers. That is important. That is critical. I'm not too sure whether. And again, I'm not debating the hygiene factor of it. Obviously, we should do all that. Doing legal diligence, it's all something which all of us do and will continue to do. It creates some touch point that it helps us to also know whether the intent of the guy is mollified, or is it that the intent is good, but it's not the right time for them to do it. It's not the right priority for them to do it, which can very easily happen. It may not be the priority. So what is the priority for an investor today, which is to ensure that every tick box is done? It's not a priority for the founder, because he's looking at survival first. मतलब वो कहाँ अपनी books ठीक करेगा जब उसको first thing you want to do is sell his product, right? He wants to do that stuff, right? So if there's a choice, and with lower resources there is always a choice to choose one, I'm not too sure he'll choose both, or he'll choose the first one, which is ensure that everything is fine and assume that the business fails. That's not a choice for the entrepreneur. So I just think that these are hygiene that have to be done, but maybe beyond hygiene, there are certain things which, as investors, it's fiduciary for us to figure out what is critical elements of that hygiene, which I'm good to live with, I'm good not to live with. Will be different for everyone. I don't think it will be uniform across.
Which matters a lot, that whether there was a delay in paying TDS, but there wasn't a good intent to do so. Unfortunately, didn't happen because as what you say, the priorities are different right now. To make sure that your operations are on track, rather than maybe you can end up paying TDS after some few months after paying few interest or whatever. but that's the way it is. So that's the one part of it. But you also have, you feel that the composition is at the early stage, the different stages, composition of the board, which is basically driving force, would make sense at the different stage or different people. For example, at the very early stage, probably you feel that more of the functional people should be there who drive the company to begin with, and maybe you want to decorate it later on. Maybe after you reach the third stage or the fourth stage, maybe you can look at it that point of view. That's probably the way you suggest to the people here.
To me, it's quite akin to how life cycle of businesses are. So if let's say there are angel investors like all of us maybe, and then there is venture stage, and then there's Ps and DPs, and I think just as investor stages are different, life cycles are different, so would at some stage the board composition be, because there is a lot of element of an ecosystem that one creates when one is very early stage in their life journey. That ecosystem is very, very powerful. It's very, very relevant for a business to ensure survival for the first 3-4 years. If you get through that survival stage, which requires you to really cull out all the ecosystem that you have today, or people who are very supportive of what you're trying to do, it's more important to get that support in those initial stages, because frankly, the skin in the game is a given for the founders because they've set it up. They've possibly spent 3 years thinking and ideating about it, and the next 2 years to just struggle to get capital behind it. So they've spent possibly 5 years of their best working life in trying to create a business. So I'm presuming they're not done it with the intent to take capital out and create a poor structure which will fall apart, because any poor structure will fall apart over a period of time. So my sense is that, it's important that in the early stage, you have people who are very strong votaries of what your business is supposed to do. While they're critical, they're also strong votaries and believers of what you're trying to do. Maybe do it a better way. And as you scale up, obviously, just as angel investors lived his life cycle when the business matures to Series B or whatever, a venture stage will live out its life cycle at Series C or whatever. I think you need to also know that this is good enough for a life cycle for the board to be, and then restructure it. Because it's not that it's a decorative board. Sorry, I used a term which was not possibly appropriate. But it is about saying that this is a constructive board for the business that you're generating today and what you want to do in the next 5 years. So, I think if founders understand that, and the board also understands that this is not a lifetime honorary position, right? It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be for the period that you are very effective and contributing to the business. Then it's fine. But I think it should keep moving. It also keeps founders on their toes, because it keeps them to think further, think future. Because you would have milked out your ecosystem, your board, your sounding boards after the first 5 years of you being in the business. So you require fresh ideas to come in, and the board enables you to do it. So there are two elements, right, for any business life cycle which is relevant. One is when you raise capital, you want to choose the guys whom you want to participate with you, assuming that you have the ability to choose the guys, right? So if again, I'm taking Infosys as an example, but if Infi wanted to raise some capital, I'm sure they would have taken the choice of investors that they want, because there's enough and more people who are wanting to be with them. It's important for them because they're making a statement that these are the guys I think will add value. Second is when you create a board, because these are the only two statements that a company makes as they grow. And that's what everyone would do. So I just think life cycles will make the board be relevant and irrelevant over a period of time.
Signed is the Senate to
Thank you, Nikhil. Now, the extending the same concept or same thought to Padma Shri Mohandas Pai, sir. The decorative board, or maybe a very legendary board, we talk about it. Now, how does it? At what stage do you think you have invested, or rather through you, a lot of venture funds have invested a lot of money. Over 250, ventures have been funded by you, on the advice of you, by your venture funds. At what stage, or what do you think in terms of a board has to be very, very what do you call it? And we can use the same word like decorative. Why I want to I'll bring in the context here. There was a company in US called Theranos. in case you heard about it. Now, if you look at the board members of that company, are like all secretary generals and so forth, Scholz or Henry Kissinger and everything, and that company got valued almost for $9 to $10 billion just based, so people have trusted, huge amount of trust has gone inside that company, but those people remained, the whole other side of it is the corporate governance completely collapsed for different reasons. I would like you, you to tell us about how important it is and what's the real function of the board as you have experienced it right from the basic stage of Infosys till now.
Look, my views are totally different. I believe corporate governance is a culture, an attitude of mind, a practice, not a process, not a board, not a structure. A structure, a process, board are to make sure it works and there are sufficient checks and balances. Look at all the great companies in the world. Every great company has suffered at some point of time. They are the most wonderful people, like you said, in Theranos and others. Well, they're not going to spend time. They're not going to get into details. They don't even know what is happening. And many of these great people come to board to converse on some other things and don't get into details. And neither are the company management interested in giving them details. Because the value for the company management is a decoration. Let's be honest about it. So to me, corporate governance is a culture, an attitude, a way of life for people. And it has to reside on very simple principles so that everybody understands this. Otherwise, it gets complex. And like, Nikhil said, for startups who are to survive, the processes may take up too much of time and not important, even though I don't agree with some of his views. But, the process is not the end result. The process is just a means. Now, what do you mean by this? Look, in any corporation, when you take outside capital, you must understand you can't use the money for personal purposes. You can only take a salary which is agreed by somebody else because you can't get a salary for yourself. You can't divert money. You can't pay your relatives and buy some car or something like that for yourself. You have to use it for the purpose that you are raised. So integrity and honesty of the founder is the most important thing, which is expected. Second, very importantly, you have to communicate to the investors constantly about what you have done and the plan that you have given them. Because everybody invests on an idea or a business plan or a projection or things like that. We go by something that has been told to us in the PPT. It was very nascent. So you have to communicate to everybody and say what you're doing and give a plan as to how you're going to communicate and discuss that with everybody. So that communication reporting function is extremely important. And the third, I strongly believe there has to be compliance. Compliance is not an option. It's a necessary condition for survival. And that's why I like what Anil says about not being on the board. Nikhil, it's not about whether you like the company or not, because people make mistakes, Nikhil. And when people make mistakes, you happen to be on the board, you don't want to get the notice and suffer. For example, in most of our companies, we have the right to be on the board, but we go as a board observer, we don't put our names. Why we don't put our names? Because something could go wrong. There's so many companies, so many things are happening. You don't know what is happening. They could make genuine mistake. Like you said, they think that they don't have money, will not pay TDS, now we'll pay it later when you got money. But that is an offense under the law, and all the directors get a notice and they're in the dock. You can't escape that. And you'll be stuck for the next 20 years trying to get out. So what Anil Joshi says is perfect. You get to be a board observer and you make sure that you have all your rights under the agreement, but you don't have to be on the board because they have to take your approval for many things as per the agreement. And you are on the board anyway, so you come to know what it is. And they're not going to go against you. So to my mind, it's very important that compliance is done. The next thing which is important for a corporate governance is fairness. How do you treat your employees? You must pay salaries on time. You must pay your vendors on time. You must collect your receivables. All right? And there must be transparency and disclosure. Now, these are all basic ingredients which are part of a culture. Now, it's true that many people who form companies do not know all this. They think, chalta hai, theek hai, I just use it to buy lunch for my girlfriend. I just use it to go for a holiday. I'm entitled to it. I'm the CEO. You must say the strict no, no, no. Like Nikhil said, you take your wife for lunch or dinner, you pay for your wife. That's very clear. You don't do certain things. Certain things are not done. Once when I was talking to Murthy, he came back to me and told me from a NASCOM meeting, we were discussing about somebody who had hidden some assets under something called loans and advances in the balance sheet. So I want to know what are these loans and advances? They seem to have given money as a loan. And I told him, sir, we don't have anything like that. Are you sure? Then I told him, sir, if the thought of doing wrong doesn't come to mind, you'll not do wrong. The thought of doing wrong doesn't come to mind, you'll not do wrong. Another time he came and told me there's something called Palmalat. Pradeep and others, you may remember the Palmalat. As you know, some of you may remember that Palmalat Italian company which had $1.5 billion of money in the bank which was not there. So he came and told me once, oh, I read about this. How much money do you have in the bank? I said about 15,000 crores. Are you sure the money is there? I was shocked. I said, why? Look at Palmalat. Then I told him, sir, are you going to be here 2 days from now in Bangalore? He said, yes. Okay, I'll go to the bank, withdraw 15,000 crores, bring it to the office. You and I will sit and count. So the point I'm trying to make is corporate governance is a culture. You should not do wrong. You should follow some basic principles. All right? That is point number one, and you should not deviate. Very often, many people, like somebody said, they're engineers, they don't know. Not that commerce graduates know, not that some young CAs know about it. Because, you know, sometimes we are all a little bit lax. We say, theek hai, kar denge, paisa lenge, kal dal denge, wapas, nani ko diya, isko diya. You know, there's nothing. You have to have a clear distinction. We should not do certain things, should not do certain things. That's point number one. Then, why do you require a board? Well, you need a board with people, maybe some of us don't want to be in the board, who are going to be your advisors and mentors to act as a check and balance. So you go to them to report, and they have to give your advice. They have to make sure that it happens, and that's the way it is. I think that's a very important thing to have a good board. Now, are you going to get a good board for a small company? You're not going to get a good board. You're not going to be compensated. They can't afford to pay you. If anybody goes to a board and spends his time because he thinks he wants to make the world a better place, I don't know about that. So I'm not going to talk about that in any manner. All right. So I think it's very important that we are sanguine about the board. But the board's role is to make sure that whatever checks and balances are there is there. For example, the board is there for superintendence, direction, and control of the company. That's what the company's access. Superintendence, direction, and control. Superintendence to govern, to review, control to make sure compensation is paid, properly approved, and the founder's work is evaluated, and whatever has to be done is done, reappointment, etc. And guidance is when you talk about strategy, etc. So you require a group of people who can do all that for you, because when you are a founder, you not run a company before. How many people who run companies have become founders? Very small. This may be your first company, maybe at best a second company. Third company is very, very less. Am I right, Anil? Not many three-time entrepreneurs, maybe two. So you don't know. You are discovering. But if you have integrity and if you have the honesty with you, you'll not do wrong. So most of it is taken care of. But you have certain obligation under your investment agreement, and those obligations have to be done like a budget, like a pre-approval of the business plan, like compensation pre-approval, appointment of certain people has to be done, the board content, blah, blah, blah. You have to do it. So you require a board as a sounding board and as a mentors to do it. Now, can you have a checklist and do everything else? A checklist helps you keep it, helps you to make sure that you follow certain process which has to be done. So compliance is important. If you don't comply, you go to jail. You go to jail. Like somebody said, maybe in India we are very lax. In other countries, you go to jail immediately. India, it may take some time. But certainly, if you are caught with compliance, your reputation is spoiled. Which investor will give you money if you're gone to jail because you're not compliant with something and task ka chori kar diya? It's not going to work. So compliance is important. You can't postpone it, because if you postpone something, you'll postpone what your obligations you have to the investor also. So I think it has to be done, and the investor have to make sure to get the money. And lastly, you spoke about a decorative board and others. My honest view for a public company and a private company and a startup, a board is necessary but not sufficient. The board is necessary, is not sufficient. If you think a board is going to ensure corporate governance, a board is going to do it, and all regulators believe so, SEBI believes so, RBI believes so, government believes so, the law believes so, I think we're all mistaken. Because the board has very clear limitations. They're not going to spend the time, they don't have that information, they don't have anything coming to them, so they depend on internal auditor, they depend on statutory auditors, they depend on processes, they depend on the company secretary, they depend on the CFO. That's why your certification, all that. But all that is for a large company. So for a startup, which is a very small company, you've got to keep things processed and create the culture. And the culture can be created if the investors tell the entrepreneur and the founder, hey, this is what you got to, this is what you look for. keep to the agreement, make sure you comply with the law. Here the checklist, like Anil says, make sure you comply with it. Don't touch the money. You take only what is due to you, pay everybody on time, no personal expenses, no this. If you follow all that, you have good corporate governance. And as you grow bigger, you can put in those checks and balances and processes and everything else. And like somebody said, you don't require a great board till you go public, because you require people on the board who are there. And lastly, again, the investors sign the agreement, have a board seat. Many of them are, don't mind being on the board, unlike Anil or maybe me. They don't mind being on the board, and they want to be on the board because for them, the matter of prestige, I'm on 10 boards, 5 boards, 6 boards, etc. They've not got notices home. So maybe some of us have experienced that. So they're quite sanguine about it, and that's fine. But you must make sure they comply with everything. So I will end here by saying that, look, it is nothing to do with boards. It's nothing to do with checklists. It's nothing to do with everything else. It is just a culture, a way of life. They pay your bill, and that's what is to be done. And all chartered accountants, when you study chartered accountants, you're told that, right? You have to be ethical. You have to have integrity. You have to be honest. That's what our parents tell us. That's what we're supposed to do. And just do that. You will have very good corporate governance.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Pai. And yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes, I mean, yeah. Please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to narrate an incident. It was.
I was coming to that one. Yeah, great. I mean, I was coming to look at from the panelists some sort of incident where they have gone through, where either is a dilemma or conflict of interest or experience with respect to good governance, please.
Yeah, I will come to that as well. But let me share this personal story. This was in early 2000s, and I was traveling in a train in Germany along with a colleague of mine, and both of us were having these bags with laptops in it, right? And there were a couple of other Germans around, and one old lady asked me that, "Are you from India?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Are you a computer engineer?" I said, "No." She said, "Oh, you don't work for Infosys?" So my point is that that a good culture, I totally agree with what Mohan said. A good culture generates its own brand, generates its own reputation, its own a aura almost, right? And it takes years. It takes a hell of a long time to generate that. But just one infraction is going to destroy it completely. So in GE, we used to have this saying that one strike and you're out. Now, all of us from the cricketing country don't understand this phrase, but it is to do with baseball. And normally in baseball, you can take 3 strikes. The 3rd strike, you're out. But in GE, we used to say one strike and you're out. So once you do something wrong, you're out. The point I was trying to make also was that there are various natures of governance issues that we are talking about. Some of them are to do with ethics. So whether I want to take my girlfriend, or maybe I'm too old for that, but some of the younger ones want to take the girlfriend out for dinner and make the company pay, that's to do with ethics. And that's to do with let's say, value systems. And it's probably fairly straightforward whether I should do it or not, right? But there are several other things in companies which are not that straightforward, which are not so clearly or easily understood by founders who are young, founders who have not been through the grind or training of a corporate life and so on. Let me give you a couple of examples, right? So first of all, let's say revenue recognition, right? Now you bill, and I've been an industrial person. I'm not a software person, so I'm talking from an industrial perspective. So if you invoice something, right, and then you ship it, and then it is received by the customer, and then it is accepted by the customer, at what point do you recognize the revenue, right? And you're reporting every month, you're reporting every quarter, you're reporting every year, right? And there are, at the boundaries, there are invoices which have been raised, but the goods have not been shipped. The goods have been shipped, but goods have not. So at what level, and it sometimes can make a lot of difference to your period results, right? That's one thing. It's not the most obvious thing to do, unlike, whether I should buy a car on company's account or not. There are in Indian situation, like I was saying, environment has to be also improved for ease of doing business. There are things like shops and establishment registrations, right? One of the companies that we went into had accepted investments from kind of friends and family investments, fairly, in crores, but friends and family from outside of India, right? It had come into their balance sheet and they were living life merrily. But when we came in and we did due diligence and we found out there was no FEMA approvals, there was no RBI approvals taken for it, right? Now, these are some of the issues which don't become the most obvious for a founder. And that's where processes and systems, that's where a little bit of guidance, that's where a help from professionals like CAs comes in, and it is required. I think you can, at an early stage, there is always this thing that, listen, I have too many, everything is in scarcity, right? Whether it is cash or it is talent or it is manpower or it is time, everything is scarce in a startup situation. And you always say, listen, let me douse this fire and after that I'm going to do this, right? But we all know that you douse one fire and two more come up, and that's why we say we are living in a VUCA world, right? A volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous world. You tackle one problem, two more will come up. There will never be the free time, the right time for you to then start looking at governance. So it has to be done as we go along. But that doesn't mean that for a small company you have to be as let's say governance has to be as pervasive, as intense and as comprehensive as for a listed company. But the standard, so there are two different things. You have, for example, you're building this thing, right? There is a quality. So quality could be that, okay, quality is that I'm using a material which is not so great, right? And then there is technology. The quality can be lower as long as you do what you say. So you say I'm using such and such material and you use it. So that's quality. Technology is specs. So you're saying I'm building something for 6 months or I'm building something to last for 10 years. That's technology, or that's, those are two different things. So similarly, the governance also, the structures, you can have light touch governance earlier, but standards have to be high. And then you can have intense and pervasive governance later as the maturity grows, but the standards still have to be there. One strike you're out has still to be there. So those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Very true, Samit. Thank you so much. Dhiraj, do we have some questions or should we continue? Should I continue with Anil and?
No, you continue, sir. It's a very interesting.
Okay. So Anil, you said you have 3 companies waiting for your approval to be on the board of those 3 companies. Is that something which you have experienced in past, which makes you think in this manner with respect to particularly startups? I'm not talking about non-startup companies, but basically the startup domain where you have experienced few things like that, and you feel that I need to be very, very careful before I move on to the board of any of these startups. I mean, real life example.
So Pradeep, I think Pai sir, very rightly have put, the reason for us not being on board. We have, right to be on board, but we are now observer. In fact, I'll end up spending more time with, these companies than I would have done otherwise, on being on board, right? We come on board when things are in right perspective, and we have to spend more on growth of the company and rather than help building them from ground up, right? We actually land up investing at early stage, sometime even at it's just an idea stage, right? Landed up investing in one company which is just an idea stage, and we all know. In fact, I respect this governance and compliances, and I don't want to be on wrong side of fence, because I could have avoided, as rightly told by Paiser, that why I want to be on wrong side. I'm not responsible for certain act which I don't know, because another problem, like I will also take liberty, Paiser. Companies like Infosys or any other, they have resources to have to do right checks and balances, right? Internal audit, external audit, statutory audits, and several other checks and balances. I'll say audit, right? But when it comes to startup, sometimes they even want to save money because they are worried about whether they'll be able to pay salary next month or not, right? When these are the situations, then you try to cut, which probably you will think is not right, but actually it's required, right? That's why we are slightly. So I think earlier the trend was that any company I'll invest in, I'll take a board seat, because I have fiduciary responsibility to my investors, right? I rightfully agree with Nikhil. But then, with experience, we realize that, we need to have a model where we have right, but at the same time, we protect our interest, investors' interest, and then companies also not, deprived of, value add from us being on, board of these companies. So we take, that's how we have started structuring that. While we'll have, right to appoint a director, but we also, take an observer position, right? And wherever I have been on observer, I am spending more time on those company, and right, probably one or two company are rightfully ripe for me to come on board, because we also discussed a lot of about decorative and legendary board, because certain companies you need people who matters, right? Like if you talk about fintech, and it's all about trust, right? I will work with you only if I trust, right? If I have to deal with banks, bank would like to know, if Mohan Das Sai, like Mohan Das sir is on my board, bank will have, a lot of comfort, and he will come on my board only if he have, that faith and trust in me, right? So I have to build that to bring him on board, right? So, no, and if, I am bringing somebody on board, I cannot be observer, right? I also have to take board seat, right? So we have learned over a period of time, and then that's how we have devised it, so that we can not become a hindrance. Because if I'm on board, probably in certain cases, Nikhil rightly said, I'm more worried about getting product out. I'll say, to hell with your product, compliances pehle karo, because my other 6 companies are suffering because of you, right? So that founder would do this, or he would put all his energy in doing compliances. I don't want to be on wrong side. So we have to keep a balance. When we invest in, we ensure that like if you will look at, we ensure that none of our companies are on wrong side of fence, because of compliances. First, we lay a lot of emphasis. In fact, I did the Sky Global Summit is going on. We did one panel this morning, and one of the factor which I highlighted, that before making investment, this legal DD, financial DD is all there, right? But we ourselves spend 2 to 3 months with founding team to ensure that the people we are investing in are right set of people, right? In many cases, we walk away from investment only because we don't get that comfortable vibe, right? So it's more a need of ours, right? We have just adjusted and adopted to the new compliances, and I'm sure like even SEBI is putting a lot of compliances for us as a fund manager, and we are adopting to it, and just trying to see that we don't become a hindrance for a growth of a company. At the same time, we continue to do our fiduciary responsibility. So that's the background, sir, nothing else.
That's a great perspective, Anilji. To give when to go on board, when to stay sideboard. I think that's a great perspective you and Mr. Pai has given. And I think people here in the audience can be very, very selective in taking the position. Not that in excitement they go onto the board and get into a different difficult situation sometimes. Dhirajji, do we have time, or
yes.
should we move on?
So I think I have one question to the Mohan Das Pai sir. Being a large audience of the chartered accountant and entrepreneur, any motivational thought to the all your fraternity members, in not on the only just on the corporate governance, I'm talking about for the startup ecosystems.
Well, I think let's look at data first. India has 50,000 startups who have created $180 billion of value, with 41 talking about the system. All right. So my advice to everybody is that this is a great opportunity for young chartered accountants and others to partner and to grow this kind of a sector. It's happening all over the place, and all startups require professional advice. They require chartered accountants to advise them on setting up systems, on their audits, on their accounting, on making sure that the transactions are recorded properly, making sure they can prepare proper projections with backup data, making sure they're in compliance, making sure they can prepare investor pitches, and helping them grow and helping them get board members, etc., to partner with them. Of course, you've got to have an arm's length transaction, arm's length deal. In case you're going to be the auditor, you've got to be very careful. Don't become an accountant and auditor. You've got to keep a distance. And I think this is a great, great place. So I would urge all of you to look at this space, actively work with them. Now, you may not make much money because many of the small companies may not be able to pay you. But if you work with them over a period of time, you will be able to get good fees. And don't take any options from them because they're going to be conflicts of interest. You've got to be careful. And they should look at you as a trusted advisor. Trusted advisor. Now, you could be young, but you're a chartered accountant. As a young chartered accountant, you've gone through an examination. You have the necessary skills and the necessary value system. You adhere to a code of ethics and conduct. So you are kosher for being their advisor and mentor. Stick to the straight, narrow path. Don't deviate. Don't tell them how to do things wrong. Don't be on the edge of law. But this is a fantastic sector. Look at them, help them build good systems, and make them grow. India required 100, 200 companies like Infosys, TCS, Wipro, etc. And India is going to become a $10, $11 trillion company by 2031 at the latest. So you got the best years of India's growth in front of you and a great industry which is full of young people. And like Nikhil said, there are people who are highly educated, highly motivated, highly talented, just like you people. They have a different culture. Help them participate and grow, and you'll do well.
Great. I think that's the key message to the all chartered accountant. Just wanted to brief, sir. In 2018 we had a startup marathon, and we invited the chartered accountant led startup, and you will just amazed near about 500 chartered accountant led startup were there. I believe that now it may be more than 1,000 and maybe more. So, rather than in 2000, when we seen Motla Oswal, Anandati, and these people became an entrepreneur, you become an entrepreneur now. So, more and more entrepreneurs of chartered accountant going to become and became successful. Do you want to give any success mantra to all chartered accountant to be an entrepreneur in the startup?
No, I think entrepreneurship, first of all, is not for everybody. Let's be very clear. I'm sure Nikhil will agree, Anil will, not for everybody. You could have enormous passion, enormous energy, the ability to sacrifice today for tomorrow, the ability to live a dream, the ability to motivate people, that the ability to be perseverant, the ability to keep going in the face of adversity, and the ability to communicate is a very special, different skill that you need to have. And I think it's extremely important. So all of us must realize our limitations. And if we feel that we have all this, go for it. And don't expect any reward. Don't get carried away by high valuations some companies have got. They're all exceptions. Like I said, the 50,000 startups, only 40 unicorns, right? Out of 5,000 startups coming up every year, only 1,100 get funded, out of which maybe 100 will do very well. And the rest, quality rate is very high because the risk-based business. So entrepreneurship is a special skill which requires an inner urge for you to be there and to sacrifice and to work hard. If you feel that you got it in you, you're going to stick to it for the next 5, 7, 8 years, go for it, live it. Because even if you do not succeed, you fail, it is fine. The experience you get is unbelievable. You never get it in 2 or 3 lifetimes. And if you succeed, it's fantastic. You'll be on your own master, the master of all you survey. Because chartered accountant, most people want to do practice too, and you want to be independent, and you'll be very independent. So I would say that you have been trained well, you have a good ethical system, you adhere to a code of conduct, you know the difference between right and wrong. And if you feel you have this entrepreneurship skill, go for it, and I'm sure you'll do well. You got Anil here, Nikhil here, who are role models, who have built companies, so building companies running. And I'm sure if you go for events, you can talk to Sami to get advice, or to Pradeep to get advice. And when you go for events like TAI and NASCOM, and you meet young people, you can see that excitement, the excitement of creation, the excitement of doing tomorrow, the excitement of changing the world. So to me, that passion and energy is something that you must have in abundance to become a good entrepreneur.
Thank you. I think all the participants.
Yes, can I just say one thing, if you're okay?
Yes, Nikhil.
One key takeaway for me from this entire event is I'm not going to miss Mr. Pai speaking anytime again. Sorry.
Thank you, Nikhil.
Thank you all. Yeah, go ahead, Diligence.
So basically, all the participants, I wanted to thanks to the all panelists over here. The key takeaway from this topic is you need to create a culture in the ecosystem. You have to be very ethical, as Samir Bhai has said. Be very ethical. You don't spend on any kind of personal expenses. You need to have a chartered accountant quality like integrity, honesty, like mentioned by Mohammed, and you become a complete compliances kind of part of it, and don't be follow the decorative board. Let's be very authentic and very systematic part. And once all these steps going to follow, definitely the success may definitely be there. Not in immediate term, but you will feel satisfied. Yeah, everything is gone perfect, and that's going to pay in the for the future in the brand building. So with all the panelists, thank you to all panelists, Montas Pai ji, Nikhil Vora ji, Sanil Inamdar ji, Anil Joshi ji, and of course Pradeep Babu ji for excellent session. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you all, sir. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you,
folks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So friends, it's now time for next session for today. Today is the third day, and today is the second session is internal cash management for startup. And internal cash management startup, we have very eminent, again, power-packed entire day. Since morning we were having with Pai and Nikhil and Pradeep and others. Now we have the Ninad. We have seen him, as a chartered accountancy time days, from the AppTech days. Now we have the Ajay Mittal, chartered accountant. Is sitting by UAE as a chartered accountant. Again, a lot of people are there. Anuj Damani is also going to join. He's there. So all the power pack, again, it's a panelists are there. So without taking up time, this is another important aspects in the startup ecosystem. Internal cash management for startup. Generally, we have seen that a lot of startups are with engineering background or IIT background or other background. They didn't the cash or financial management system, and they're lacking on the internal accruals or cash management system, and that is why because of the in non-proper handling of cash management, they cash flow system, they fail. And that is the reason this is the topic we chosen for our chartered accountant fraternity member, those providing services to the startup, or himself a chartered accountant. So this is the main topic of attraction, and we have my council colleague in the council, the senior council, my both friends, Devasis Mitra and Ranjit ji as well, from the council. I request my Devasis Mitra ji to have an opening remark to start this session, then we'll take forward.
Thank you very much, Dheeraj Khandelwal ji, and good evening to all of you. Great pleasure on my part to be part of this, Manthan 2.0. It has already become a very big hit because Piyush Goyal ji was there in the inaugural session, and whatever he has spoken has been widely reported in the media. Today, just before this session, I was listening to Mohandas Pai and the other speakers, and the way Mr. Pai was speaking about the ethical standards that the chartered accountants have. That was very heartening to note. And Dheeraj Khandelwal ji and Chuk Saab, they have been really putting on so much of efforts to see that this is a great success, and already it has become a great success. So today, this session, as Dheeraj was telling us, we have the internal cash management as a topic. Very, very important, and something which is which is as part of a DNA of a chartered accountant. If you tell a chartered accountant that guide me on internal cash management, the chartered accountant will immediately put his hand up and say that yes, I'm very, very much trained to guide you. Now, Dheeraj was telling us that we have IIT graduates, IIM graduates who are putting up startups, and they require professional help on this. And you see, who better than chartered accountants to help us out with the internal cash management? Cash flow is truly the lifeblood of a healthy business. It's truly lifeblood of a healthy business. And it's very important that our cash flow is, very, very good. And, it is because of this that now the government of India has made the cash flow statement compulsory as part of the financial statements of medium-sized to big corporates. So you see, even the government of India feels that cash flow is such a very, very important area. And today, for this session, as Dheeraj was telling us, we have a power-packed list of panelists. We have C.A. Nand Karpe, who is the moderator, Damani from Manchester, and C.A. Viraj Jena, and Ajay Mittal. I think Ajay Mittal, I don't know whether he's joined as yet or not.
Yes,
I'm here. So, yes, Mittal, and a very hearty welcome to all of you on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Such a great pleasure to have all of you on this platform sharing your views on internal cash management. And I have no doubt that those of us who are listening to you will go back feeling that much more enlightened. With these words, may I now hand over the proceedings to Dheeraj Khandelwal. Dheeraj, please now take it over.
Thank you, Devasis Mukherjee. So friends, this is the panel. I just wanted to introduce all the four panelists over here, including the Ninad. I know Ninad, since last 20 years, and I was when the regional council in 2006. Since then, I'm seeing him in a lot of in the issue conference. He's a chartered accountant. He was the MD CEO of AppTech Limited, and he started his entrepreneurial journey, and he's also set up a partner 100x VC firm, 100x VC, and which is a early startup investment firm, which is investing more than 100 startups, and he's also very instrumental in a number of incubators. He's guiding all the startups. Since then, I'm seeing the number of programs. He was also chairman of the Western region of the CIA, confidant of the Indian industry. He is continuously helping all the supporting matter, and personally, I know him very good. So I welcome Ninad to this particular forum. And another panelist is Anuj Damani, young managing partner at ICAI India Venture, and I think IT industry or investment industries know his name because of he invested in Oyo, Purple, Tala, and a lot of food. And he have the impressive portfolio, invested more than 100 startup, and he is a fourth generation entrepreneur who firmly believe in the investing in the startup is the early stage creates the maximum impact in their life cycles. So Anuj Damani, welcome to you this particular forum.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we have Viraja Jaina. So he's again a good friend of mine. He is chairman, managing director of Imperial Capital Investment LLC, and widely known that he bid for the Jet Airways, and he tried a lot to save the Jet Airways bidding from the UAE. He is a chartered accountant, fellow member of the institute. He's now taking a role of moderating the entire session because he's quite a much experience in this entire ecosystem. And from last 4 years, he's continuously working, and he always be a great speaker for the institute, always be in part. So it's a great Ninad is a good moderate this particular. So welcome, Ninad. So let's start with taking a monologue from 2 minutes from each and everyone about the internal cash management for a startup. So we'll take the lead, take the monologue from each and everyone, and start the dialogue and take forward.
Thank you, my friend Dheeraj. It's always a pleasure to see you, and your warm, smiling face is always delightful. Thank you, and thank you, Debashish Mitra. It's a pleasure to moderate this session. I don't have any firm views, that's why I'm the moderator. Ajay has firm views, AD has firm views, and so does Biraj. So they are going to have firm views. I have moderate views on this, so I'm just going to moderate it. I have requested the panelists to speak for 7 to 8 minutes on the topic, and then we'll have some questions, and then we'll open it up for the audience as well. The topic is very, very interesting, internal cash management. So it's internal cash management for startups? Is cash still the king? Is cash still extremely important? Is frugality important? How do you survive in this tough times, post-COVID times? How do you become a unicorn and have effective cash management? There is a whole lot of kind of questions which come into my mind, but that's not for me to answer. That's for this eminent panel, three of them, to get going. If you don't mind, I will request Ajay to start the proceedings and share his thoughts on this very critical topic of Intel cash management. After that, we'll have Biraj, and of course, our friend AD will round it off. And then we'll have some interesting, hopefully, round of Q&A. Over to you, Ajay, for your thoughts.
You unmute yourself, Ajay. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. Now, I was saying that I'm overwhelmed in the company of all of you eminent people. I mean, I am a chartered accountant by profession, and sometimes I forget that I'm a chartered accountant. I have never practiced as a practicing chartered accountant. I've been always into, fund management from the time I passed out my CA in 1993. And to that extent, my whatever observations will come, they will be from a business side rather than from a accountant or from a regulatory perspective. So, this topic of all the topics, if I chose this, it was for a very particular purpose, because I consider, cash to be the blood of the business is the obvious statement. And, there was a time, in the second part of last decade, wherein money was like not a important consideration. You tap the wall and money will flow. And any company with any kind of, reasonable business model was getting funded. And whenever it was getting burnt, it was funded again. And to that extent, it was felt that a person who can, market himself well and articulate his business plan well will always be able to raise money. And from that perspective, people with all the technical and managerial expertise were feeling that, either fund management, cash management, or back office management are kind of not important functions. What is important is you should know the business that you want to set up, and you should have ability to articulate that. All of that has changed substantially. This is the decade. In the previous session, Mr. Pai was telling that India has 40 unicorns out of 50,000 startups. So everybody talks of unicorns, and people forget why out of 50,000 startups, the 40,000 are struggling, and every year some few thousands are dying. I think the main reason for that is their inability to manage cash. Some of the important attributes I will say in terms of internal cash management, that cash is required mainly for, I would say, three things. Number one, it is to incur expenses, which I call as burn. Second is working capital, and third is capex. These are, I would say, the three most important components. Whether a founder who has set up the startup with all the passion, he is having an understanding of an account or not, it doesn't really matter. A businessman need not be an accountant. What is important, he is understanding the cash flow part of and what this business will require, and whether he is kind of managing these three important components of cash management. How much I have a business plan, how much I will require for setting up this business or growing this business from level A to level B to bring it to the growth stage level, or till the time that exit happens for me and my investors. So this is an entire roadmap. Maybe in the beginning he is not clear about it, what it will be 2 years down the line, what it will be 5 years down the line, but he has to have a clarity what it will be 2 years down the line and 3 years down the line, and to that extent, what kind of expenses he would want to incur. Whether he has this money on his own, or his business is throwing that much of cash, or he has external sources of money like from friends and relatives, or from angel investors, or from bank, or if it's a relatively bigger company, from a venture capitalist or a private equity guy. Now, all of these things, are known at least at some stage to this guy, but it is important that the founder knows that until and unless there is a clarity on this when he's setting up this business, he will make a mistake of first spending too much of money and then regretting why I spent this money. So I'm talking of only the expense part of it. When the business is set up, obviously he has to be clear about how much of credit I am providing to my customer, whether it is in terms which I call as account receivable or debtors. How much of credit I am providing. And in terms of the stuff that is taking from outside, this account payable, how much he has negotiated his leeway in the time that he can pay that off. This working capital management also involving how much of inventory he is wanting to create. The biggest mistakes I have seen in my 20 years as a venture capitalist private equity guy is that people who are ultra bullish, they end up locking their money in working capital. Now, this is not something which is excusable that the businessman says, an entrepreneur or founder says that, boss, I didn't understand it. He has to have a broad understanding, boss, how much time does it take for my money to come in and how much time I need to pay off my dues. And so the capital management, for working capital management. And the third is, and in my assessment, for the kind of startups we are looking at, something which is like least significant, but can be really important is the CapEx. How much money you are spending in creating your production facilities, in plant and machineries, in your offices. Are you taking a decision that instead of making a CapEx heavy model, I make it a CapEx light model, wherein I outsource some part of my production, wherein I concede some part of my margin, but at the same time, I don't have to invest too much of money. Many of these things get resolved if you reach to a particular size and profitability, you know that you'll be able to raise external money. But till the time you do it, you have to be extremely cautious. Also, equally important here is that in typical startups, getting leverage finance is very difficult. Getting money from banks and NBFCs is very difficult. But at the same time, I know, having been in the financial system, that most of the banks have now come product for emerging economy. And so are you in touch with those guys and understanding what will be the ways and means to raise that money at 10%, 11%? And, and I'm presuming your business is, your ROI is higher than that. So you can service that at 10, 11% more easily. In any case, when an entrepreneur raises the money from a VC, their expectation is at least 25% kind of an IRR. From that perspective, debt finance is always better if you can get it. It's difficult, but it's not something which is impossible. So from that point of view, having an eye on option of leveraging is also something which an entrepreneur should know. You would notice that I am putting a lot of onus and pressure onto a founder, but it is for an obvious reason that he is the one who is sticking his neck out. And he is bringing the rest of the team together with him, including the investor, which follows later on. I will rest at this point in time and will follow up with my thoughts later on.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. I think you started off very nicely by saying that fund management, cash management, back office were never considered important. And, in today's context, it is as critical as having good sales skill, if I may. Add that, and of course we'll get your thoughts. But I was struck with your one particular thought, and I'm going to press you on that after everyone has finished. Ultra bullish founders lock too much money in working capital. I hope I can tweet that and give you credit for that. Sure. But I'm going to press you on that. It's a statement which may have some counter view as well, and I hope the other panelists have some other views on that. But good, nice summary. Over to you, Biraj, for your 7-8 minutes, thoughts on this interesting topic, internal cash management. We're looking forward.
Unmute, Beja.
Am I audible now?
Yes. Now it's fine.
And Israel, and thanks to the great governmental leadership from India. So we feel very proud being in Dubai, and we have got a real privilege to be on the front line to look at these startups. And currently we are working with about more than a dozen startups from Israel who are wanting to come to Middle East and to, of course, India, though it's been my endeavor all the while for last 4 years to divert funds and investments from other parts of the world to India. So startups, when I started this whole idea of getting into business, the first thing that come to me, why am I doing this? Am I the right person to do this business? So those questions are very essential, I feel, after spending 4 years. And luckily, with blessings that my enterprise is successfully running as a wealth and investment company. So I always look, there is, the startup entrepreneurs as like, say, visionaries. They are like idea miners, I call them concept miners. They constantly keep on mining new concepts, new ideas, and then they try to connect that concept into a sellable process, sellable product or sellable services. So this is where the startup actually takes birth, when the idea or the concept has come to a visionary or whom we call as a founder. And then the whole gambit, or the whole exercise of converting this concept to a sellable product, phase one, and then realizing the revenue and keeping the cycle on and on is the second phase. So this journey of a startup needs to be really analyzed very carefully, and it should be documented, as a reference point for people who are joining us subsequently. Cash management is actually, like when I was doing my CA, my partner had told me that finance accounting is the nerve system of the body. As the neuro system goes all through your body, finance and cash reaches each and every aspect of an organization. You pinch somewhere and the pain comes somewhere else. It's like nerves. So similarly, cash management or its impact can be felt, at remote places, remote corners of the organization if it is not managed effectively. Managing cash is not simply, normally what we think is that, there is the inflow, there is the outflow. You have to be very intelligent enough to control your inflows and to restrict your outflows. But then we sometimes, need to give importance to the few aspects, what I call the 3 pillars for startups is, preserving cash. It is not that, you get your cash from various sources, from investors, from your own money, or from banks, or a VC, or to that matter, whoever is ready to support you. But to preserve cash, that is, netting it off with your outflow commitments and increasing that index of preserving cash, because every organization as a startup can definitely calculate an index of preserving cash. So preserving cash or increasing the cash preservance index should be, in my opinion, the first aim, because if I can preserve cash, then I can treat all the kind of ailments in an organization, all the possible fallacies that might follow through one medicine or through one treatment, that is preserving cash. And if I'm preserving cash, obviously the second concept comes that it should not affect my cash flow. While I'm trying to preserve cash, I need not restrict my outflows, or I need not overmake my inflows. So making the cash available at every point of necessities is also a vital part of the cash management system. And third, probably is, with my experience, it is the most important, is to avoid a risk of investors' confidence. Essentially, your investor, be it a VC or a PE or even a bank or anybody else, so you can't take the risk of shaking their confidence on you and on the entire concept that you have built. So the 3 pillars of preserving cash and making cash available at every stage of the operation, and to safeguard the confidence or to secure the confidence of the investor, these 3 should be the main aims of the cash management of a startup. And of course, there are too many people have contributed too much. Like the other day, I was talking to somebody from a very developed country. His question was, how low is too low? When you are talking about low and high or ebbs in cash flow, how low in an organization you should be get alarmed. I have reached a stage that I need to augment my cash flows from further investments or further borrowings. So this continuous dynamic assessment of the critical level is also a equally important aspect of managing cash. And of course, the tips are there, how you can increase your revenue or how you can restrict your outflows, delay your outflows, and there are hundreds of means these days. Especially, I am not trying to be India specific, but then globally there are hundreds of means now to convert your invoice to cash. Of course, it has a cost. It has a cost varying to the risk involved. Good old days when, 20 years before, people used to only call about invoice discounting or factoring. But today there are really hundreds of means of converting your invoices. Then you can counterparty, the third party cash flows are very vital for success of a startup. Many companies whom I know are doing well because the companies they deal with are very good in their cash management, or they are cash rich companies, or they have a bigger credibility in the market. So you are dealing with Mr. X, so that gives you a better standing in the market to source your credits. So these couple of aspects I think I'll just supplement this with what Mr. Ajay said about the internal cash management system. But just before I finish, I must say that essentially these visionaries, these concept miners are always risk takers. This is my general, I don't want to be specific. They're always risk takers because the psychology is a very vital factor. And we have got one psychologist in our organization, psychiatrist rather, who understands, who tries to explain this to our intending investees or borrowers, that they always try to overestimate themselves. They always try to overestimate the future in the sense that they never underestimate the risks. They always overestimate the confidence. So these are the few factors which directly or indirectly affect the internal cash management, which is a very vital resources for the organization. And with this, I would allow Mr. Kapre to go ahead with others. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Balaja. You made some very valid points. Finance, is no center. You spoke constantly about visionaries, concept miners, idea miners, and finally, how low is too low? I'll come to you with that question once I'm done with the others. And don't worry, we'll ask you very easy questions. You don't have to worry. This will be much easier than handling a tough investor. I'm normally very easy unless someone provokes me, and I'm sure AD is not going to provoke me. So over to you, AD, for your few thoughts.
Ninal, in fact, I had written that, I hope, even though you're moderating, you'll at least find areas where we disagree and make it very interesting for the audience to find out more, right? Yeah. Entrepreneurship is such an interesting topic because all of us, can only provide guidelines, right? Because eventually what makes a business successful, there are all case studies that can also go against each other. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Viraji. Thank you, Ajay, for the great conversations before. I had to go off screen and edit a little bit of what I was going to talk about. So I did not cover what has already been covered. Thank you, Dheeraj. Thank you, Devashish. So see, I am not a CA, right? But being Marwadi, I think I'm a born CA. I think we were born with the trial balance and with account receivable statements. Know where the cash is. And so what I'll do, I'll just utilize my own experience as an entrepreneur, because I did not raise any venture capital as an entrepreneur. I pretty much raised customer capital, which means I sold and I made sure they paid me. And I ran, my internet business in school the same way. When I was in college, rather. I also ran my first business in the US on the same lines. We just did not raise any capital from outside. And then when I actually got into investing and I started working with startups, one of the things that I always talk about with them is having the right habits, right? Having the right structures in place, because I think cash flow management is the second most, or running out of cash rather, is the second largest reason why startups fail. Almost 30% of all startups will fail because of running out of cash. In fact, like Viraj said, that they are the central nervous system. So in fact, if I look at the top 20 reasons, I would say you can always bring that back. If you asked 5 whys,
on every single reason why a startup failed, on all those 20 reasons that are out there, they would all come back to not managing your cash well. So as an entrepreneur, I think it's extremely important that you need to know at every given point of time, where does your business stand, right? You need to know your trial balance inside and out. And like I said, I'm not a CA, but so I'm not going to get into the technicalities of all of this. I'll just talk about, what are the right habits to put into place, right? I think one of the first hires that any business should have, and it doesn't have to be a full-time person, is to get the right accountant, right? It is so important to have the right reporting back to you. I see so many startups, that their expenses are all over the place. They're in different accounts. Some of them are in their personal account, some are in the business account. And when they come and they present to us and we're interested in investing in them, then suddenly during due diligence, you realize, oh, I forgot that, I made 5 lakhs of expenses on my personal credit card and I have not shown that in the business books, and I need to transfer it over here. Oh, I forgot to tell you that I'd given the business a loan and I've not taken it back. Now we're telling them, listen, you have to convert this into equity because you can't use our money to pay back previous loans. Or in one case, it was an extreme case, but somebody forgot to even look at, how much paid up capital they had signed up for. They forgot it by a factor of 0. So instead of 1 lakh rupee paid up, they were supposed to have 10 lakh rupee paid up capital. And at the time of funding, they realized I have to now take 9 lakh rupees out of my own pocket and infuse it into the company. And there is no way to get that back because that is equity money. And imagine that right before the investor writing the check, you have to now find 9 lakh rupees somewhere in your network to invest into the company. And so I think the accountant, getting the right accountant is such a key, hire. Like I said, it doesn't have to be somebody who's full-time. You can get a part-time accountant. They, find the right guy. Get a very strict auditor, right? I think a lot of startups, they want to get an auditor that they can completely, just tell them you sign whatever I'm telling you to sign, and that should be fine. I don't think that is the right attitude a founder should have towards their auditors. You need to have auditors that will ask you tough questions, that will get down to the bottom of why certain things are getting done. Because in many ways, they are also checking the work that your accountant is doing. So unless you yourself are a great accounting personality, right, you need to have a right auditor in place from day one. And again, I'm talking more just from the habits that I have. One of the things that I also recommend to entrepreneurs is that you report numbers to us every week. The idea is not that I'm interested in tracking everything you're doing. The idea is that are you tracking everything you're doing, right? And if you are reporting numbers to me, which means you're reporting numbers back to yourself. Right? Internally, I run, I obviously run a fund. I run the fund management company. I run a family office, and I run my personal account. And I have my accountants present the trial balance to me every Thursday, and I go through the trial balance every single Friday for 30 minutes just to understand where is the cash, right? Where is the money? Where is it stuck? Is it stuck with the client? Is it stuck with, is it stuck in an investment? Where is the money? Where is the next money coming from? What are my net liabilities? Trying to prepare for. And unless I'm doing that on a weekly basis, unless I know where I'm standing, how am I an entrepreneur, right? If you ask any large company that is listed, they need to know exactly what their fiscal or financial situation is on a daily basis, because they have to make liabilities in and out on a daily basis. So why not inculcate those habits right at the start? Right? It is so much easier that once you get into the habit of sitting with your accountant every single week for 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, you'll finish your trial balance. Just look at the accounts that are open, ask questions, know exactly where the cash is at, right? Many times, I cannot even tell you this is how many times I have to tell entrepreneurs that before, and this is now part of my term sheet, that before I wire the capital to you, you need to have a liquid fund account open, right? And entrepreneurs will come and ask me, sir, why do you care? I said, why do you care, right? Why can't you put the money in an account which will give me some interest? And if you're raising, let's say, even 1 crore, and you've got an average balance of 1 crore in a liquid fund for a year, you make extra 3 lakh rupees. 3 lakh rupees, which you will then cry for at the end, right? When you're running out of cash, right? So as Marwadis, we are known for obviously making our money work double as fast. So all these things, need to know where the cash is. If it is sitting in a bank account, is it earning interest? It should not be lying idle. If your money is lying idle, you will always be working for somebody else, right? So if you want to work for yourself, your money needs to work for you. So these are the kind of things that you find out from sitting and looking at your trial balance on a weekly basis, right? That where am I standing? Again, it takes 30 minutes. It is such a simple exercise once you get into the habit of it, right? Next, you need to know how much runway do I have, right? Obviously, if you're seeing your trial balance, you know how much cash you have, how much are you spending, and you need to know at every given point of time how much runway is left Do I have 16 weeks of runway? Do I have 20 weeks of runway? Do I have 3 weeks of runway? I need to change your strategy based on that, right? That if you know that you're about to run out of capital in three weeks, should you be going out and buying a MacBook, right? Should you be approving expenses? Us entrepreneurs obviously are highly positive people, right? We always are living on a wish on a prayer. But honestly, that doesn't work with your bank account, right? No bank is going to pass a check because you're living on a wish and a prayer. So always know how much time do you have left before you're going to run out of capital, right? And always plan. I mean, if you're getting to a situation where you have less than 6 months, which is 25 weeks of capital, you need to be out there raising a round of capital, or you need to get customer advances to ensure that you are not in a situation where you're not going to meet your liabilities, right? Liabilities include paying for your own team as well. And last, a couple of things that are there is, first of all, get a budget. So work on the budget and then budget your work, right? So make sure that you're not just keeping a budget as an exercise to keep the investors happy or to keep the board happy. This is the budget that I'm proposing, but when you go out and from day, the day the board says it, tomorrow the budget is going to be different. No, actually, we're not going to follow this. We're going to do something else, because we, all responsible investors will track that the budget that you have promised, have you spent according to that budget, right? And they have made their plan. They have made their investment into you on understanding that you're going to spend X amount of money on marketing, Y amount of money on sales. If those numbers don't match up, you lose confidence of your investor. You lose confidence of your board. You don't want that at the end of the day. And I think it's everything I've said may sound like it's a lot of work, but I can be honest with you that I have been running almost 5 or 6 companies now for the last 8 years, and literally just because I know where we are every Friday, right? I've been able to manage these companies with just 30 minutes of work in a week, right? 30 minutes. That's all you take out. But again, obviously, have all these other things have to be in place, right? To get the right accountant, make sure everything's happening in the right business account. Don't be, putting expenses in personal accounts and only revenues in the company account. So company looks like it's doing fantastically well, and you personally are out tons and tons of capital. But put in the right habits. Internal cash flow management is not rocket science. I think many people have done it and they do it well. It's just a matter of putting the right habits, having the right reporting, and being anal, right? That you are going to follow this regardless of whatever happens. If there is a hurricane outside or a cyclone running through your town, you need to know what's happening in your trial balance on a weekly basis. So Ninal, I think I'll leave it there. I know I've not been very technical with the topic, but just talked about from personal experience. And I'll take questions. I mean, we'll obviously have those conversations.
Sure. Thank you, Eddie. We brought you because you're not technical, and you didn't, you delighted us with a lot of your thoughts. Reporting, how important is it? You mentioned about the fact that you should have proper runway, budgeting. Thank you, Dheeraj, for holding this on Thursday, because on Friday, Anirudh will be more concerned about where is the cash. Show me the money, the famous dialogue. So exactly. Friday is a little nasty day. So never call Anirudh on Friday. Always.
Especially not after 5 p.m. because 4:30 is my time to check the accounts.
So I won't send you any WhatsApp on Friday. Thursday is a good day. But you made 2 interesting statements, and you have a very unique style of using words very gingerly and giving the meaning. If you want to work for yourself, the money needs to work for you. This is all for young CAs who are watching this program. And work on your budget and budget your work. Very interesting statement. So these are Twitter statements. You can tweet it, but remember, Anirudh Damani has said it. Give him credit. Don't say I have said it. Okay. So we'll have a round of 10-15 minutes, probably Q&A. Viewers, listeners, if you have any questions, post them in the question. I will take them shortly. Let me start with Ajay and ask you straight off on a topic which probably is uppermost in your mind. It's the other side of the coin of cash management, which is being frugal. So we have been 8-9 months into this horrific pandemic. The world has changed forever. Frugality is now considered no longer something which is looked down upon. How important is it in the cash management system? Being frugal, how critical is it, and where to draw the line?
Obviously there is an obvious answer and there is more nuanced answer. See, frugality, in my assessment, is not spending less money. It is frugality, in my assessment, is a mindset issue. an entrepreneur has to be frugal in mindset, in the sense that a money which needs to be spent only should be spent, and should be spent in a manner which is like you are satisfied, yet you couldn't have saved any money out of it. So I will give an example. So if you are, you're looking for doing business, and you're meeting a customer, you would want to meet a customer in a place which is befitting that meeting. So you would want to meet in a decent restaurant, or ideally in a 5-star hotel. You wouldn't want to meet the guy in a Darshini restaurant. So you are not saving money by meeting in 5-star hotel, wherein a 2-hour bill possibly will be a 2,000 or 2,500 rupees. Versus if you were to go into a normal coffee shop, it will cost maybe 300, 400 rupees. Now, for me, it is intelligent frugality that you went there, you spent quality time with your potential customer or potential employee or any such person, and you spend money where it is required. So for me, frugality is not about money alone. It is, as I said, a mindset issue. What money I need to spend, which will help me in my business expansion. Now, coming more practically, this is more a philosophical statement. Coming more practically, there are times when you are looking for growth of the company, wherein that I have to spend in my marketing team, I have to advertise, I have to do schemes, I have to, have a very strong sales engine, I have to open different branch offices, I have to open new store. That is a growth phase. You will spend lots of money in the team, in brand building, and in creating infrastructure. But the period that you talked about, the COVID is a period of survival. I'm telling you, if you are in a hotel industry, and even if you spend 10 crores a month in advertising, you would get a customer. Then what is the point in spending that kind of money? So in those periods, and I experienced the same period in the early stage of my venture capital business. We started our first fund in 2000 for UTI Group, and then the 9/11 happened and the dot-com bust happened thereafter. The 2001 to 2003 was a dark phase wherein many companies suffered. And I remember one company we had in Mysore, and in those days we used to do a smallish investment of $1.5 million. That entity raised money. It had plans to go to USA for setting up its marketing office over there. They did nothing of that. They used that money basically to increase their technical capability, and in that period they converted themselves from a services company to a technology product company. And ultimately that company got sold. We were there in that company for almost 10 years, and we made about 50 times in that investment. Now, I'm giving this as an example that in these difficult times, it is important that you just look at survival. Another example in another of my portfolio company, during this COVID times, they were expanding fast and they had raised huge chunk of money, and it's a pan-India brand. But when this COVID happened, because of this lockdown, nobody was coming into those centers. So one after another, so they thought for some time and they decided to close many of those centers. They retained the key employees for some time, but then they realized that this lockdown situation is not going to last in a hurry. So they allowed them to go. So in the process, some part of the investment that they had done in the last 1 year, it kind of got wasted. But in the process of retaining that, they didn't incur additional money. I mean, they stopped their fund by taking an early decision that this is not going to work. They closed that. They saved while their revenue came down. Similarly, the expenses came down, to the burn remained under control. So I think in these difficult times, I don't know whether these lessons that we are learning in these 9 months, whether they will be applicable going forward. But this is very, very simple thing, that this is a survival period. Frugality is a necessity here. It is not even a virtue. It is a necessity. You have to do it because, any kind of money you spend, you can't be sure that you will be able to raise money. I'm talking of some of the very good companies some of the business models will undergo a change. So I'll again give you another example. A SaaS company, now SaaS is a very sexy word. Those companies get valued for 10 times, maybe 15 times of the top line also. Now, this company was focusing on aviation, airline and hospitality, with about, along with their acquisitions, they are about 45 million top line company. But as of March 2020, I am 100% sure that company will not do more than 15 million in March 21. Okay. So for such a company, if they don't raise a new set of money, the burn is not, sustainable. So they have to cut down on their expenses. So I think frugality in such situation is absolutely essential.
Frugality is essential. I'll quickly move to Biraj and then to Eddie. I want to open it up for the audience. So maybe, we've got just next 5 minutes probably before we open it up.
I think you continue, sir. That's, interesting is going on. So you continue. We'll have a question from the audience in last 10 minutes. Sure. Chalo, whatever you say. I won't be frugal in my questions to them. So, Biraj, you've done large-scale investments. You've been in a country where you're seeing scale, large investment opportunities. How important when you do, investments of those size, how important in your mind is the cash flow estimation, the cash flow, the way it is estimated by the founders and the entrepreneurs? How important is that aspect before you make an investment decision?
You're on mute, sir. Mr. Biraj, you're on mute.
Okay. So this is a very vital aspect for any or every enterprise. Being in Middle East, with due respect to the country that I live in, I always call it as a plastic country because nothing is natural here. And say 95% of the people do not have the roots in this country itself. 95% people are expatriates. So having seen the way the business is growing or new businesses, entrepreneurs are coming in, setting up industries, and some of them are really burning out, and some of them really being successful. The investment decision into those industries or those businesses or to those startups, they are so monumental in the sense. I will again give two small examples without demeaning or meaning not to draw any parallels. So very recently, UAE saw a massive issue with a company, Indian-owned company. It was a couple of $1 billion, and it just got, it collapsed in 10 to 15 days, and the people had to literally leave the country, and the whole process of restructuring and recovery is on. I'm not taking any names, being a public platform. But the other hand, I'll take a name of a very successful enterprise here. I met this gentleman, Mr. Yusuf Ali, who is the owner of Lulu Group of Industries, and God knows how many billions worth he is at this point of time. But these are the extreme pillars I always consider, and there are thousands and thousands in between. So considering that the big investments are happening here, and we have access to investments coming from literally from every corner of the world, from China, from Russia, from Europe, from Africa, all the big families like Mr. Damani himself, would probably know of it. All the big families of the world have a footprint here, be it from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Myanmar, you name it, in Asia, in our neighboring countries, or all over the world. So these investment decisions here and to take a prudent analysis has been really daunting and very challenging.
Sure.
And being in a wealth and investment company, and we are partially regulated, luckily, because we are not fully regulated by the central bank or the security authorities here. And because we are like a reincarnation of a private bank kind of thing here. So far, they're allowing this. So the decisions have been always more cautious than what normally would be in India.
So, but how important is cash flow statement? So, yeah.
The cash flows here are actually the only lifeline of the organization.
Okay. So it's so critical.
It's it's the only lifeline because the person doesn't have a credential. He doesn't have a backup like one would have it. He has just come from X country to Middle East. So the cash flow is the lifeline and the livelihood of the organization here. So when I see or evaluate an organization or investment proposal, the only thing probably I, as a chairman, look after is only how prudently they are projected their cash flows and what are the components that has gone into building the cash flow. Because that is as important as the cash flow itself. How you are managing the cash flow, what kind of estimates you have taken, what are the alternatives you have built up, what are the secondary and third rated of investments you have planned to supplement if there is any challenges in the future. So cash management for large industries in Middle East are absolutely the lifeline of the existence of any organization.
Okay, great. So, AD, you have been an ace investor in a lot of early stage startups and a lot of startup ecosystem. How important do you always feel as an evaluation metric? I'm sure you have a lot of evaluation before you invest in startup. How important is the cash flow of the organization, of the startup?
I mean, I'll just use, it is a lifeline, even for a startup. Let me explain how. Many times, founders come to us to raising money. And when you start sitting down and understanding the business model, they actually need money for working capital. We tell them you've come to the worst guy, the worst investor to raise working capital from. I said, you should take working capital even at 40% interest, but don't come to a VC. That's simply because VC's expectation, the opportunity cost of his capital is 80-90% IRR, right? Because we have to deliver from one investment such huge returns to be able to make for all the failures. But if you start delivering returns at 20, if you are going to invest this very expensive capital, which is let's say 80% IRR kind of capital, into areas where your return on ROI is 24%, it means you are buying something at 80 rupees and selling it at 24 rupees and saying there is growth. But there is no growth. You're eventually losing your own company. Because if you're raising expensive capital and you're paying for it from your own balance sheet, eventually the person losing out is going to be the founder. And that is very important from a mindset perspective. Like it's something that Ajay talked about. Frugality is a mindset. Even how you invest the venture capital that you're raising, whether you're investing it in the right way, that is also extremely, extremely important. Right? Many times I see just founders trying to invest in very low ROI areas using VC money. And I tell them this is the wrong application of the capital. You need to invest this capital in areas where you can deliver very high IRR, right? And very keyword here, invest the capital. You're not here to spend the capital. I think there is a very, most founders, they talk about burning money or spending money, but honestly, you've taken investment, so invest the money. Now, you would not take expensive money and then invest it in very, very cheap areas, right? Cheap as in terms of a ROI perspective. So for us, it just tells you the maturity level of the founder. It tells you how much they have really thought out why they are raising the capital. So sometimes more than raising the capital, like we've said earlier, it is much easier these days to raise capital. The real point is, can you actually, invest the capital in the right areas? And if that is not happening, I think that really becomes a factor of whether the founder is mature enough to understand what capital they really are raising.
So talking of founders being mature enough, I want to ask you, a follow-up question. If you're doing a repeat investment, suppose the founder is a great guy, a lot of, entrepreneur skills, poor cash management skills. Now he comes to you for repeat investment. This got great business, opportunity is huge, it become a future unicorn, but the guy is lousy at cash management. What will you do? Will you invest, not invest? What will you do?
So, I'll borrow from Sanjay Mehta here, right? If the market is awesome and the jockey is not that good, you'll somehow make money, right? If market is lousy, jockey is good, you're going to lose your money, right? So sometimes it really is a function of the market, right? Sometimes even I'm surprised that, we think, how is this going to actually ever work? Chalega kaise, right? And then somehow the market is so massive, and just because you've got a particular leg up, you end up getting, a ton of the business and the business as well. But usually, if you're asking me, let's say it's a developing market, right? And we now have to make a decision. Looking at this guy, he's not really spending as per the budget that we had agreed upon. And usually we've seen that he's not he or she is not somebody that is good at cash flow management. We will try to stay away, or we'll try to put even more checks and balances on the utilization of capital, right? Like, is it getting utilized in the right areas, right? Because obviously, if he's come back for a new round, he's trying to raise more money than last time. You don't want to throw, more good money behind what is potentially looks like bad money. But if like you said, if the area is awesome, the company is actually doing well, and maybe the issue really is with the jockey himself, maybe try to put a couple more people around him. Maybe on the reporting, on the finance function, that could help him in that area, right? But if we feel that the market is awesome, company is suffering, founder is suffering, maybe in that sense you may not come back and reinvest.
So questions have started, on my panel. So maybe I'll, intersperse my questions to you with some questions from audience, because I was going to ask Ajay, what are the early warning signs of bad cash management? And in fact, there's a question from the audience: how to check unnecessary expenses made by a startup? So there have to be some signals. You have been in this industry, VC industry, for a long time. What are the early signals, warning signs you see of bad cash management? You have to unmute.
I'm so sorry. No, I'm saying it's a very interesting question, because what happens is when we invest, we remain very, very involved with the company, not only at the board level, but very deep monitoring. And, sometimes the shockers come at when we are not expecting. But in general, I will say that what is important, and this is something which both my panelists, Mr. Jaina and Mr. Damani, used it earlier, that how important is budgeting, and how important is to very rigorously, the follow up onto the budgeting aspect of it, whether the budgets made are just for pleasing the board, or are they being actually used and being followed with the right intention? You may still do may have deviation, but is it being used it as a benchmark to get achievement? So from that perspective, when we do our monitoring, and we realize that the company is kind of missing on their numbers, and at that stage we come to know for certain early signs. For example, if the company had projected that it will have so much of top line this month or this quarter, and this kind of an EBITDA. Now the company is achieving top line, but is missing on EBITDA. Then you'll have to go and see what is the reason for that. And sometimes we come across that to get that number, the company is kind of reducing its price, giving additional discount in the name of, that these are, important customers, we have to retain them and all, which is, if it's a one-off thing, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll have to presume that the price that they project that they will be able to sell their goods and services is not the sustainable price. So that has to be reduced in their projection. And if that projection of revenue is retained, and based on that they have kept their cash flow, that this will be sufficient for the cash flow. I'm presuming particularly for a net burn company, the cash balance is very important. That is where when we say, boss, this is not going to happen, you will require cash much earlier than what you have budgeted. So one is that your budget versus achievement, and number two, sometimes what happens is, in the name of working capital management, you start deferring your payment substantially. So in your balance sheet on the liability side, your account payables keep on piling up. Okay. So while your cash is intact, you're saying that cash is not getting depleted. The fact of the matter is your liability is increasing, and someday you will have to pay. If you don't pay your vendors in time, they will stop supplying things to you, or they will supply at a much higher prices. So that's another thing. You do a balance sheet scrutiny to see whether additional liabilities are getting building up. Sometimes people, I'm sure we are all professionals, so I can in confidence share that sometimes people don't pay governmental dues like GST and advance tax. they use it as a working capital. I mean, you can do it one-off. That can't be your strategy. So from that perspective, when you see these signs, you know that the management, cash management is not sufficient, or the company's cash projections are not sufficient, and the company needs to pull up its socks.
Okay, company needs to pull up its socks. There is a specific question to Anirudh Damani, so I'll take it up. Startups don't have money, everyone knows, even for working capital. What is wrong in startups asking or expecting this money from VC for working capital? Is it wrong?
I see it's okay if it is again for a very short period of time, but understand if you're consistently using expensive capital in areas where your ROI is not going to be as much as the cost of that capital, you're losing money, right? Is because understand that even capital has a cost, right? It's the same way as you would understand what positive unit economics are for your business, right? Or for your product or service. The same way to understand what is the cost of my capital. If I can borrow capital from a bank at 24%, and I've got and obviously you use working capital with the intention that I'm spending today, but I'm going to get this back tomorrow or day after tomorrow, right? I'm not talking about areas where there is R&D or marketing where typically that's where the VC money should be utilized. It is gasoline. If it is gasoline, then utilize it for the right area, right? I think where startups get it incorrect is that when they start thinking that I can give long credit lines to my customer and utilize venture capital to fill in the gap because I made that sale and I'm going to fill in the gap using VC money. Eventually, if that money doesn't come back, you have spent very expensive capital and put it at risk, right? And I don't think that is the right utilization of the capital. You will eventually end up. It will not look to you like anything is wrong, but you will end up losing the entire business because you've just consistently hollowed out your balance sheet by using very expensive capital in areas of very low ROI.
So I want a quick 1 minute response to what Ajay mentioned. Don't default on statutory liabilities. One-off is fine. He gave that one-off is fine. Are you okay with one-off, or you would say nothing doing? He just gave us one-off is fine.
Sometimes in the course of business, right, it may seem like you've utilized a governmental due for working capital, but again, it cannot be a habit.
So okay, right? You're also okay with one-off. Okay.
But again, it is in areas where like I was supposed to get a payment today, it did not come in, and I have to make a liability payment out today, and therefore I'm using what I got as GST. I have seen something worse than that. I've seen people who have not paid GST for 2 years, or back in the day, service tax. They are charging service tax. They don't have a service tax number, right? Because the founder never knew that service tax is supposed to be registered for. He's just collecting service tax, right? And utilizing it, thinking, I'm supposed to be allowed to do that. So the problem there is of financial literacy, maybe for founders, is not available in most of your IIMs today, or even your business schools. Again, you have to bring in the right professionals for it. But again, in the course of business, if you're running a large enough business, sometimes you will have a cash flow mismatch. Again, don't make it into a habit, but one-off thing is a different thing than saying that is your strategy. Many people have utilized that GST, GST payment is in 3 months, right? So let me just utilize this cash and I'll figure out when the time comes how to pay it. That's not, I think, what Ajay is talking about. Neither is what I'm endorsing in any way, right? But sometimes you might have today I have to make a payment for GST, or I have to make a payment to one guy today, and GST payment is day after tomorrow. I'm supposed to get this money back, 1 day before that GST payment is due. Yeah, okay. Sometimes in the course of running a business that happens, but don't make that into a strategy, because you'll get stuck in a very bad way and in way worse situations, right? I mean, TDS responsibility, pay it on time. Always pay TDS on time. Do not take any chances with paying TDS. And it's due on 7th of every month.
They come to bite you later. They do come to bite you later.
Absolutely.
So one question is from the audience, and I would like to turn to Biraj, because you're virtually on the global stage in this match. So this person has asked thrice, so he's very insistent on can we have a situation of negative cash cycle, or zero cash cycle? So have you seen or experienced such situations with startups and entrepreneurs?
You need to unmute.
Yes. See, yeah, there have been several cases of negative cash balances. The most prominent case probably would be Uber, and everybody knows about it. It's been 11 years. The company is yet to turn a profit, in spite of coming with an IPO in, I think, last year, 2019. Still, the company, and I have some people out there in the Uber top management. So they constantly face this situation of a negative cash flow. I mean, their net cash burn have been a serious trait, and there are several rounds of raising funds. They have successfully done it, though it may not be possible for everybody to only meet the net cash burn, the cash losses. But it depends on the strategy, or it depends upon the business cycle. Like, I'll just take a minute.
Sure.
For startups, there are three things. One is the concept, and the second is the implementation. Third is revenue. So depending on what stage of usage of the funds, and the negative cash flow will have a different kind of impact. But yes, there have been cases where there have been negative cash flows. But then, there have to be for a good reason. It should be explainable, and there has to be a very dynamic forecasting system, which must take into cognizance the negative cash flows of the earlier months, and to whether it needs kind of a correction that has to be done. So this is a very continuous process that we have been following. I have certain startups, even established companies, who are having negative cash flows constantly, even pre-COVID time, and we have been trying to take corrective steps. But yes, there have been cases, but I don't want to put it as a goalpost, but I have seen many companies, in my experience, with negative cash flows have been very successful in due course. I may not be able to explain it in such a short period, but they have been very outstanding results given by those companies who have faced with negative cash flows, because they have been for a constructive purpose, probably.
So talking about Uber and cash burn, there's a question specifically to Anirudh, and it's saying Zomato has significant amount till now, but they're now capturing value. Is customer acquisition part of cash burning process? Is that an investment, you would call it?
In fact, I'll borrow what Viraj said. Any kind of cash burn, right? It has to happen for a limited period of time. It cannot be unlimited periods of cash burn with no visibility of making money at any time. I think those kind of business models we've already seen with the WeWork fiasco and what it has happened on the listed space with the Uber and a Lyft, that doesn't work out. Eventually, businesses, the dharma or the whole concept of running a business is to make a profit, right? And if you're not making profits, you shouldn't be in business. However, it does what I think is really important to understand is not the net cash burn, is to understand whether there are positive unit economics, right? Because some things that you're spending on today that will deliver returns tomorrow. But if you are making operating losses, then I think that is the short death knell, right? If you are working on negative unit economics, right, then I don't think those businesses should scale. Because when you're scaling, you're only scaling a problem, right? It makes no sense to scale problems. If you want, like Zomato was not making losses at the operating level, they're making losses at the net level, which is okay. When you're a growing business, those are things that are going to happen. It's like a country, right? When a country is getting made, right, it's going to need more capital for it to get made, right? So it's the same thing. Sometimes at Zomato, you have to hire people that in R&D, you're building product, you're building services, you're opening up markets that require upfront investment before that investment comes back to you. All that is not captured. It gets captured on the bottom part of your P&L statement, not on the top part. That top part should always be positive. Right? You cannot be running operating losses. And I think COVID was such a great scenario, right? Any business that was running operating profits did very well. Any business that was running operating losses shut down. Right? It was a very almost parted the ocean when you talk about it. What is going to work, what is not going to work. And today, that's why you're seeing a lot of VCs, founders, even academicians talking about we need to get back into positive unit economics. We need to get back into operating profits. I think we cannot, no matter what the way your business is growing, if you're making operating losses, you're in trouble.
Great. So I think we've got just 8-10 minutes left. I'm going to pit each of you against, someone has made some statement. I'm going to put it across to someone. So Ajay made an interesting statement. The biggest mistake ultra bullish entrepreneurs, founders make is locking money in working capital. Viraj, what do you think? Is he right or is he wrong?
Mute.
I'll supplement him rather. The ultra bullish entrepreneurs, they become over ambitious, and my beginning I had said they are essentially visionaries. They are not typically proven businessmen. So it increases the working capital. It jacks up. That is a fact. But then probably as a small addendum, I would say that the dynamism of the business or the entire model of adding capital, which can take away this overburden of the working capital within a period of time, can be manageable. That is where that negative cash flow also comes into picture. It should be for a constructive purpose. It should not be as a inefficiency. It should be efficient operation.
How low is too low is what Viraj said in the beginning, and we have to keep track of how low is too low. Ajay, how low is too low?
I would ask Mr. Viraj to give a context so that I can specifically respond.
So he was talking in terms of course, Viraj, you can add.
Yeah, I see. Cash, how low is too low is very recently talking about the COVID, which is probably in my lifetime, COVID is the greatest teacher to mankind. To understand and knowing that cash is so important. And in India we call cash is the king. And today in the COVID time, whoever has cash is actually the king. So how low is essentially is a very relative term, because when a giant like the Emirates Airlines pays 30% salary and benches 70% of its staff, so it is a bottomless pit. But how low is too low is actually it's a dynamic equation. It should be calculated on a weekly, daily, or monthly basis, giving various weights to various variables into, of course, the three aspects of inventory, receivable, and payable, and to derive at a that Lakshman Rekha. Beyond this, the company is going to collapse, and beyond or above this, the company can be revived, and that dynamic equation, it is essentially kind of a mathematical logjam, but it is very, very essential that how low is too low depends on this dynamic forecasting and dynamic corrections also.
Yeah. So I would put it this way. There are two perspectives. First perspective is from an entrepreneur side, and the other is from an investor side. The entrepreneurs, the founders, the businessmen, as Mr. Viraj said, they are visionary. They have confidence in themselves that they can deliver on the solutions to the problems better than others. That's why they leave their cushy jobs, other alternative, opportunity that they may have in their professional career. They come here. So they are perennial positive guys. They will never realize that this much and no more. And, they will keep on pushing, I would say, the difficult situation, saying that this too shall pass. But what happens is, as investment professional, we have seen various cycles and various businesses. And we know that, putting good money after bad money is not a good idea. You have to work on, your worst case scenario as a professional, as an investor. And you have to see that if it goes below that, for example, that the company's cash requirements are like 100 crore and the company can at best raise say 20 crore or of which say 20 crore you can put in. But with this 20 crore, is there a possibility that 1 year, 2 years down the line, the company can revive and survive? Then put in that 20 crore is fine. But otherwise, if your original investment was like 100 crore and you put another 20 crore, that 100 crore will definitely go. This 20 crore will also go. I think it is a call that somebody has to make. Otherwise, there is a big list of walking deads in this ecosystem. They are walking deads. They are not dying, but there is no future for them. I think I will give you a very prime example. And since this is a very documented case, I wouldn't hesitate in taking name. Snapdeal and Flipkart were two front-runner, e-commerce companies in this country. Obviously, Flipkart was way ahead, but Snapdeal also had its brand. And there was an opportunity wherein Flipkart offered to buy Snapdeal. Rough estimate suggests for $1 billion. Obviously, the existing founders and the investors at that point in time felt, they deserve better, and they didn't take money. For a company which is losing cash, they didn't take that deal, and ultimately the company effectively folded up. I am sure it is still Snapdeal.com. Still, they would have a website and will be selling something. Okay, and I hope that company survives because there are multiple investors there. But point is, someday some person has to take a call, boss. I can push my luck to that extent, and if somebody is buying me, let me go out or let me fold up. I think that is where I would say that the decision making happens, and somebody has to take that call in a serious discussion. These are never easy discussion, but you have to still.
So last one to AD, and then I'll have a quick round of rapid fire. AD, if you recollect Jerry Maguire movie, Tom Cruise was shouting, "Show me the money." Yep. Do you do the same on Friday? Or you're more controlled and calm?
On what was that? Am I...
On Fridays, you say, "Where is the cash?" No, Thursdays are trial balance. So Fridays, you ask your accounts guys, "Where is the cash?"
So I'll tell you.
So you're not like Jerry Maguire, no? Shouting.
No. So I mean, obviously, when you're running a fund, you need to know where the money is at all times.
Sure.
But I think even when I'm looking at it from, let's say, the business perspective, that there's a difference between billed revenue and banked revenue, right? And I think what these Friday sessions are about is what has been billed and not received. Right. And I think even for founders, when it comes to working capital, all of this stuff, we need to understand that, it's one thing to have revenues, and it's great to go out there and issue invoices to people and expect them to pay. But unless that money hits your bank account, it is worth zero. It is not even worth the paper that you have sent out saying you owe me this much money. Right. And many times founders, get lost in that I have billed somebody, hence I have now recorded revenues. But honestly, you need to get into a cash accrual system that unless the money comes into your bank account, I will not report those revenues onto my balance sheet, right? Because there are other issues on the CA side to pay GST as soon as you, if you're working on the other kind of a system. So Fridays are about where is the money, right? What have we built and what has been backed, right?
All the best to your accountant. I will wind up with a round of rapid fire, which I've done just now. Based on what you've mentioned, this is not prepared. This is just now. Ajay, 3 rapid fires. You have to choose one of the two. You can't say both, neither. And within 5 seconds. Cash is still the king. Yes or no?
Yes.
Major. The topmost reason for failure of startups is bad cash flow management.
I would say it's the topmost. Yes.
Topmost. And if you had a choice between selecting or backing a founder, and we are all reading in the papers how you have backed a amazing founder which has been taken over by a very large conglomerate. I won't say more than that. I've just read in the papers. But you backed it right from the beginning. It's an amazing story. But if you have to back a founder who's ultra bullish, bad working capital or cash flow management, or an average founder with great cash management, whom would you select?
The entrepreneur number one. Top quality entrepreneur is number one. Business model is all secondary. If an entrepreneur is good, as Damani said, he will take an outsourced CFO or employ an accountant. So that's doable.
Okay, great. These are rapid fire. You have to just say one word and that's it. So if a choice to meet on a Friday evening, not after your trial balance is out, if you have a choice to meet Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, whom will you meet? Who would want to meet? No, I'm not. I'm asking Ajay.
Okay. I would say Bill Gates.
Okay, great. So great round of rapid fire. Give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
Really quick ones to you. We have to, be very fast.
Ninath, before you start, I just got the message on Team. My trial balance is here for review.
We will send you in a good mood. Yeah. So, cash flow metrics. the very important before investing? Yes or no?
Yes.
Monday morning, you've had a lovely weekend with your family. Come Monday morning, you've got two reports. You have a choice to select which one you want to see. The sales revenue report, expense report. Which one you select first?
This is for the previous week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sales report.
Sales report. And founders, being frugal actually can have an impact on the revenue, on the sales skill or the revenue. Do you
Yes,
agree or
absolutely.
disagree?
Absolutely
Okay.
agree.
Absolutely agree. And if you have a choice to meet Raghuram Rajan or Indra Nui, whom would you meet?
Indra
on
Nui.
Friday. Indra Nui. Okay, round of applause to him. Viraj, since you're on the international stage, I'm going to have very, very light questions for you. If you have to select I have to tell your entrepreneur, select between 15% reduction in cost or 40% increase in revenue, one of the two strategies, which one you select?
I would go for increase in revenue.
Increase in
because
revenue.
we can always control the costs.
Sure. Increase in revenue. And cash management skills are important or sales skills? Which are the most important skills for a founder?
I think cash. I'll go for cash.
And if you have a choice on Friday evening, which is a holiday for you, to meet Ritesh Agarwal of Oyo or Brian Chesky of Airbnb, whom would you like to meet?
I'll prefer BNB.
Airbnb, Brian Chesky. Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Ajay.
So
thank you, Biraj. Thank you, Edie, for that quite an interesting kind of topic. It's a mundane topic, but you made it so interesting with your comments. I heard a lot of new things. I learned a lot. I hope all of you who have watched this last hour and a half have learned a lot too as well. Over to you, Dinesh.
Thank you, Ninad, for excellent way of handling this presentation as well as taking this in the panel. So superb, question framed up and nicely you have the rapid fire round. And one of the main things which are there in this topic is internal, cash management system, which is already everyone has spoke the same way. It's required to improve your cash management, and you should have a positive cash immediately as soon as possible. So all of the chartered accountant and Anuj is already deemed chartered accountant. So all the CAs have the same question: improve your cash management. So lovely, and it's a great, lovely session. We have my council colleague, my good friend Rajit Agrawalji from Kolkata. Let's have the closing remarks from him about this session. Ranjit Agrawalji.
Thank you, Dheeraj. First of all, my compliment to you and Hansraj Chug of this committee for very nicely organizing this series of the session on web startup. I think you can make a Netflix series on the startup, the kind of series you have made. So thank you very much for making this initiation. Friends, before coming to this one line for this working cash management, if you see this India is a country of middle class and lower middle class, where basic facility are also not available to a large population. And that's the reason there has been a massive boom in the number of innovative startups from tier 2 and tier 3 cities, as necessity and opportunity both exist there. And just see that this Ranjit Singh from Maharashtra, world best teacher, $1 billion. He has just the innovation he has, how he taught the students. The teaching has become a fun game, and that's was the reason this India is full of abundance, talent and opportunity. And as India is the third largest startup ecosystem in the world after USA and China. But if India has to take this initiative forward, in my opinion, is to take the failure as a positive. Every failure is not a fraud. The mindset of Indians is that if he is a fail, he is a fraud. This kind of attitude, if you have to go, only then we can make our India prosper in this country. And that's why as far as this cash management is concerned, you have rightly seen now the bank who are giving the loan, they are also now managing how the money used by the account holder. They are not allowing them to have another account in another bank. If they have taken the loan from X bank, they cannot open account in Y bank. So the bank has also learned the art of monitoring the cash from startup, venture capitalist and all these things. So this is the good sign. And if the India as a young population, it's a huge talent. Then all these things can be very effectively. It is said that the good startup builds a business, but great startup builds a category. And how this startup can very well manage the cash, as rightly said by Ajay Mittalji, cash is the blood of the business, and three parameters he said: key expenses, working capital, and capex. These are the three major areas where the startup has to look into this, because product for emerging economy and ultra bullish things are there, but all these three areas are very, very important. Rightly said by Biraja Jena that preserving cash, moving cash available, and safeguarding the interest of the stakeholders. These are the three very fundamental things which any startup has to say. And he rightly said, negative cash is also a positive. Sometimes not COVID positive, but sometimes it's also a positive. And as far as Anirudh Damani is concerned, he rightly said that it's getting a budget and spending as per the budget. Spent as per the budget is the right way, and the working capital should not be so expensive. So these are the three very thought-provoking deliberation made by all three panelists. And I must compliment the moderator, Nained sir. Very effective time management you have done for moderating this session, and you are a very good host to have a panelist, how to talk, what to extract from them. You very nicely know all these things. So I must thank sir, Ninal sir, for very nicely moderating this session, and I must compliment all the three panelists, and special thanks to Dheeraj Bhai and Chug Saab for very nicely taking this session, because chartered accountant are the breed. Without them, this cash management cannot happen. Everybody has to come to the chartered account, whether it's a cash management, cash flow, working capital, whatever, and accounting standard and all these things. So chartered accountant know better than this. So Institute of Chartered Accountant is the right place to have started this initiative, and my compliment to my chairman Dheeraj Bhai. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gigi, for your closing remark. Thank you, Nena sir, thank you, Amit Damanji, Ajay ji, and Mr. Janak. So all the participants, thank you to you also. Having a good response, more than as of now, it's more than 8,000 members seeing this. It's a great compliment to all the organizing part, to Institute, and to all the speakers. Thank you, all the participants. Let's tune again tomorrow. There are more reason to be there tuned how to raise the capital. That's the important part. Today we learned how to save the capital, how to have a better cash management, how to raise capital. That's the important part for tomorrow. Let's tune up theater. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.